Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Plaque.
Here.
Trustee Hyman.
Here.
Trustee Stevens.
Here.
Trustee Hardy.
Here.
Trustee Grace.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gower.
Here.
And Trustee Sorcelli will be absent this evening.
Okay, thank you. Have we got AV hooked up and everything? We're good? Okay, sorry. I didn't ask you before I started. All right, next on our agenda is citizen participation. This is an opportunity for folks to talk to anything that is not on tonight's agenda. If anyone signed up?
We do not know.
Okay, thank you. No one online, I'm guessing.
There's nobody showing online.
Okay. Before we move on to consent agenda, I just wanted to notify the board that we will not be doing the administrator evaluation presentation tonight. There was a miscommunication with Mountain States, so we'll get them on the next meeting agenda. Okay, trustees, we'll move on to consent. Do trustees have anything they'd like removed from the consent agenda?
I would, Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like D removed.
Okay. Anything else? Is there a motion to approve consent agenda minus agenda item D?
Can we remove tonight's agenda?
That makes sense. Okay, A and D, anything else?
No, just A.
Okay, so trustee Stevens wants D, trustee Hyman wants A. Is there a motion to approve minus the two?
Move to approve the consent agenda items B, C, and E to be combined and approved.
Enough.
And F, sorry.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, trustee Grace has moved, trustee Stevens is second. Clerk, give me a roll call. Clerk, give me a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Grace.
Yes.
Trustee Hardy.
Yes.
Trustee Hyman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gower.
Yes.
Trustee Stevens.
Yes.
Mayor Parsons.
Yes. Okay, we'll move right on to the consent A, February 22nd, 2022 meeting agenda.
Yeah, so just wondering, Chris, if maybe it makes sense to move the code updates to the front so our code enforcement person doesn't have to sit through the whole meeting?
That's up to you guys if you'd like, that's perfectly fine.
Works for me.
Yep.
Okay,
Fine with that.
let's do that. We'll
Seems
move
like
right on
those should be
to,
pretty quick.
Nope. Okay, we'll do D and then we can approve those both together. Do you want, would you like staff to have a present?
I'll just a couple, there's one item, one issue, or if you want to call it an issue, on that's the pavement, or the paving, 5-year paving plan. Let's see. Kind of caught,
I'm having trouble reading your handwriting too.
I'm out of order here. Anyway, basically, the 5-year plan, it shows where the most needed roads are, and the two main areas that were highlighted were First Street and an area in Old Town, and neither one of those are on the 5-year plan as far as paving. So, and I thought we increased the budget so we could focus on some of those more needed roads. That's kind of all I got.
First Street is.
Or Second Street, excuse me, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah, Second Street.
Second Street is a unique problem because it requires some major reconstruction. And so it's a little bit more than maintenance. We're talking about Second Street south of
Yes.
Mountain Avenue.
And I know we've talked about this before, but
Yeah.
the main thing was, it's not even in the 5-year window, so.
Oops.
Year 3?
It is year 3 actually, Lonnie. Yeah, sorry. Thank you,
It
Keith.
was year 3?
Yeah, in 2024, it says Second Street from Welch South. And
Then
And that shows as a full rebuild, which is
Okay.
what's needed there.
Then I apologize, I just didn't see that. And then what about the old, there's an area in Old Town, is that the same thing? Is it someplace I didn't see?
I guess it depends on what area of Old Town you're talking about, 'cause there are a lot of areas of Old Town that are included.
There was a highlighted yellow area which had the worst, roads. And I did not, but again, maybe I missed that in the schedule as well.
So there are, like Sixth Street is one of the worst areas in town, it's a priority one. If you notice on the map, it's page 24 of the PDF. And Keith Knoll, our Public Works Operations Manager is here, so if I go sideways, he can correct me. Feel free to jump in, Keith, anytime, but, like Sixth Street, for example, that is a priority one road. That pavement condition index is very poor, according to that engineering evaluation. And like Sixth Street shows up in year 2, I think, in 2023, if I'm right.
Is that in year 2?
At least portions of. So Sixth Street from Massachusetts to Franklin, Sixth Street south of Bunyan. There's a couple of different sections of that roadway, and they're identified as mill and overlay in 2023.
Okay. Then I just missed that, I apologize.
That's okay. But I think that's our intent is to try and deal with. We need to do 2 things. We need to keep the roads that we have good, and we need to try and fix the roads that we have that are bad. And you try to front load money to keep good roads good, because it's very expensive the worse they degrade. While at the same time trying to mix in other projects. So like when you see slurry seal, those are intended to try and keep some of those better roads in decent condition. When you see mill and overlay, that's for dealing with a road that is in poor condition. And then when you see full rebuild, typically that's something that is either the geometry's changing, or it's so bad that the subbase has failed, it has to be completely rebuilt from the dirt up. Different techniques, but we're trying to mix in each year a combination of those different treatments to try and, like I said, invest in some of the good roads, fix some of the poor roads, and then, save up some money for like 2024 to do a couple of full rebuilds, where you end up spending such a big chunk of money on those full rebuilds that you can't do some of those other normal maintenance activities. But
Okay. And where did you say the second was, in year 2?
2024.
2024, okay.
So if you'll see on the map, on page 26 of the PDF, there's a small map kind of up in the
Welch to
corner.
blue, I see it.
Those are color coded, and so that section of Second Street there, south of Welch,
I
is
saw-
color
I
coded
saw-
white for 2024.
I saw second on 2023 north of Bunyan, and I think that's what confused me.
Oh,
Okay,
gotcha.
we're good. We're good, thank you. I'm satisfied.
Discussion now. Okay.
Those are good questions, Lonnie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
And this will get updated periodically, right? I mean, this is our intent for the next 5 years, but as the next 5 years progress, for instance, if bids come in year 2 and it's 1.5 million, not $1 million, we might have to come and say, hey, we need to cut some of these roads out. Or if bids come in year 2 and they're 850,000, not $1 million, we might front load some of the the next few years worth of stuff. But with the intent that we're gonna have a plan for the next 5 years to spend at least $1 million a year on road maintenance, which is basically what we've been doing for the last few.
Good, thank you, Chris.
Right, and I assume that obviously the infrastructure budget is in sync with the street budget, right? So the Second Street planning, you've
Yes.
got infrastructure in the budget prior to that.
Stuff that needs to be, especially where we're doing a full rebuild, we would want to get any underground utility deficiencies corrected ahead of time. So yes, in areas where we're doing slurry sill or even mill and overlay, we won't do that unless we know we have some significant problems there. But if we're going to dig the entire road up, yes, absolutely want to correct the utility.
No, I just remember
deficiencies ahead
when
of time.
the streets east of Ivy Stockwell were in the paving plan, and then they had to get pulled out because the infrastructure wasn't done ahead of time, so hopefully we're beyond that type of glitch.
We should be, and actually that one is mill and overlay, and so it's tough because you don't want to even cut up a mill and overlay. Part of what degrades a road is once the surface has cuts and cracks and other things, water intrudes, ruins the base material or the sub base underneath, and over time that'll degrade faster. So the longer you can keep an intact surface, the better off that road will be. Which is why you wanna do things like road cuts prior to even a mill and overlay, but it's less critical there because that road is not getting fully rebuilt. And so then you have to kind of balance, is it worth the expense of digging those up when you're only gonna lay down a couple new inches of asphalt? Anyway, it's a balance, but I think those are all really good points.
This, I'm guessing, going up on the website?
Yes, assuming that you approve it, this will be up for folks to see, and we'll put it up on the Streets Department page on our website. And
Thank you. Any
that
other
way
questions?
people have a better idea about when their road may or may not be getting resurfaced.
Alrighty, good, thank you, Chris.
All right, is there a motion to, go ahead.
I move to approve the revised agenda and the 5-year paving plan.
Second.
All right, trustee Evans moved, trustee Grace is second. Clerk, may I roll call vote?
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Trustee Stevens.
Yes.
Trustee Hyman,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. All right, so let's push up the final agenda items, which is the snow removal code update and the weed brush animal control update. Is that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought those would be quick, and that way Teresa doesn't have to sit here.
All right, Clerk Samora, and Teresa, is it Morgan?
Yes.
All right, welcome. You here to get on me about my trailer?
Trailer and sidewalks. No, for you, not on you.
Just teasing. Good evening, Mayor and trustees. The next item on the agenda is an introduction of an ordinance regarding snow removal on sidewalks in the town of Berthoud. This is a little bit of a cleanup ordinance to clarify the regulations within the municipal code. Right now, there are 2 sections in the municipal code regarding snow removal on sidewalks adjacent to property. This ordinance would repeal both of those sections and reenact one section. The new language is very consistent with what exists currently in the code with a few exceptions. The new language does remove an exception given to sidewalks along arterial streets within the town of Berthoud. It also removes an exception given if snow falls within 4 hours of the previous storm stopping. So if you had a storm and then it stops, and then 3 hours later it snows again, the 24-hour clock would start over, which can cause a lot of accumulation on sidewalks and ice buildup, creating a danger for the public. So that would be removed also in this ordinance. And it does also change the responsible party from the Public Works Director to the town administrator or their designee. In this case would be our Neighborhood Services Officer, Teresa Morgan. So tonight this is an introduction. It's an opportunity for questions, any feedback. If the board wishes to bring this back for approval, we would schedule this for March 8th for consideration and a public hearing. So we're happy to answer any questions and receive any feedback that the board may have.
Pretty straightforward to me. Any questions, others?
Well, if you could just give us a brief overview. So right now, the policy is you gotta shovel within 24 hours. And if they don't, then they get a friendly reminder and educated on the code. I mean, so just walk me through what happens if someone's not shoveling and then if they continue to not shovel.
Certainly. So typically what happens is 24 hours after the storm, we would begin going through the neighborhoods looking for sidewalks that of course are not shoveled or in dangerous condition. And we do adjust schedules depending when the storm happens so that we can accomplish that and say there's a storm on a Thursday, we're not waiting until the following Monday to do so, so that we can address that before the weekend. The first step, first action piece, I guess you could say, would be to place a door hanger on the door to indicate that there is a sidewalk that is not in compliance with the code. If that does not resolve the issue, we would of course contact the property owner. It can ultimately end up in a citation. We generally do not make it to that point because we do work with the property owner to reach compliance, to find out what the situation is. Sometimes it can be an individual that isn't physically capable of clearing their sidewalk, and we'll coordinate with them to ensure that we can help them bring that into compliance while still making sure that they know that it's their responsibility to do so.
So do we refer them to nonprofit that can help them, something like that, or?
Yes, we certainly have done that in the past.
So it's 2 warnings and then they get a citation, or it's not that formal?
It's usually 2 warnings and then a citation. Most parts of compliance comes into play, so I don't have to go that far. If it's like a small area, we'll usually just take care of it myself, if it's not too horrible. But I do reach out for like the disabled or the elderly to a little help. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
A little help, and I do that to where they can jump in and help them out any way that they can.
And as part of our education, just explaining to people that it really is a safety hazard for some citizens, and there are a lot of people that walk their dogs and senior citizens that, you know, it's very dangerous on ice. So I mean, it's not like we're trying to be overbearing, it's just that it is a safety hazard and it is public right of way, so.
Right, and the door hangers do state the code, so it does explain in detail what it is. If I do write a letter to them and send it through the mail, sometimes I'll post the letter on their door, and in there in detail, I do have it state that it is a hazard, it is a dangerous, to not shovel the sidewalks for the citizens of the community.
Great.
Trustee Grace?
Kind of a, I guess, a hypothetical. On Spartan, there's a bunch of houses that kind of back up to Spartan across the street from the high school. Do those sidewalks belong to the town? Do they belong to the school? Do they belong to the property owners because their property touches it? I guess just so I kind of know, like, oh, this didn't get plowed because blah.
Certainly, the sidewalks along Spartan Avenue on the back side of many of those lots technically would be the responsibility of the property owner. However, in the code, as it's stated right now, what is in effect, there is an exception given to sidewalks adjacent to arterials. So while we do work with property owners to help keep that clear, in the code, we would not be able to cite someone for not clearing that, since there is an exception given to sidewalks along arterial roads.
Okay. Is that something that the town then takes on to clear off, or is it just kind of, hopefully it melts on its own, or? I guess I'm just curious, like, if it
So
technically
then-
doesn't belong to anybody, then who takes
No,
care of
but
it?
at that point, I will usually make a friendly phone call to my friend Keith over here and say, hey, can you get one of our guys to get out there and do it?
Got it, okay. So I was just curious.
So just to be clear, the memo says we're removing that exception.
Yes, that is correct.
So after this changes, it will be the responsible, the property owners, to clear that sidewalk even though their front door faces the other street.
Yes. If the ordinance is passed as written, the regulations within the code would change to state that.
And it is interesting, in nearly every situation, sidewalks on arterials are maintained by HOAs and metro districts. That stretch is really one of the few places in town where that isn't the case.
Well, do like those fences even have a gate, or do they have to walk out and walk around the block to shovel a short?
They do.
They don't, they would have to.
Yeah,
work
so I don't know, maybe we need to figure out an exception to that.
And that might be a reasonable spot to make an exception. And as Teresa mentioned, in most cases, when it's cleaned, it's us that's already doing it. So that's something we can talk about at
Can we
staff level.
dedicate that to the school districts? When they're doing
That would be
the
great.
north side of the street, they can do the south side at the same time?
That's on our route.
Keith's crew is already doing it. It's just not,
I don't
we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, not because we're obligated to, but
Okay. So maybe we don't need an exception then if we're just doing it in special circumstances.
I think that's true.
Sorry.
Question,
Okay.
are there any other locations in town that are similar to that, or is that pretty much the only one?
I think that's it.
Well, there is the other one that's on Berthoud Parkway, but the town takes care of that one.
That's
Oh,
the-
that's
the
right.
new
The new one?
Mhm.
Spartan, yeah.
Tree lawn.
Yeah, so trails are also different. So any trails that are not within Metro District or HOA maintained property, we already take care of. All the ones that are, like the Vantage Trail is the one along Berthoud Parkway adjacent to Vantage, that should be Metro District's responsibility. The same is true like in Hammond on 10E, and those stretches. Heritage Ridge on Spartan, that sidewalk and their trail is their responsibility to plow. But the ones, the few locations where we have trails that are not on HOA or Metro District property, our crews are already handling anyway.
Yeah, so on Spartan, it's the same situation west of 10th Street over to Berthoud Parkway.
And I think that's on the cruise route too, right?
Yeah, we take care of that one. Yeah. And schools, the one by the high school, we try to take care of schools, prior to 7:30. So they've always been on the list. We do a little bit extra around schools to make sure there's routes open.
That's a good question, right?
Any other questions? All right, seems like that one's good.
So do we need to do a motion to schedule this, or it's just gonna be on the agenda?
We don't need a motion as long as the board is in agreement and supportive of bringing the ordinance forward on March 8th for consideration.
You supportive?
I'm supportive.
Awesome.
I would, one comment though, I would just say go ahead and make it, make that stretch an exception so the homeowner doesn't, I mean, if there's an accident or something on there, could the homeowner, the way it's written now, could they be liable?
I think that the answer to that's probably yes. But I don't know, I don't wanna speak to legal issues, maybe I shouldn't jump in that quick, but
I mean, the issue of the liability for civil purposes is gonna be different versus whether or not there's a municipal ordinance that's been violated. The issue on whether or not there's a civil case is gonna be whether or not the person was reasonable in their actions, right? So I don't know that what the ordinance says will necessarily be a factor one way or the other in the civil case.
Even if we as the town took it, responsibility for it?
Yeah, I don't know that the judge would take into consideration whether or not that person was reasonable or unreasonable on the basis of what our code says.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'm fine, if you think it's appropriate to carve out, in the ordinance, specific blocks where the town is gonna supersede the property owner, I'm fine with that.
yeah, I think we could talk, I think it would probably be easy enough to do.
I think so.
Cause there's just a handful of locations and our guys are already handling them anyway, so. We could do that prior to bringing it back to you.
That works?
Works for me.
Okay. I think that works. All right, and now, let's go on to the next one, weed brush and animal control update.
All right, thank you. The next ordinance is another introduction for a proposed ordinance regarding weeds, brush, and animal control. This one is really just some clarifications of definitions within the code, as well as the addition of one definition, that being vegetation within the code. I'll kind of go down the really three main changes that you'll see in this ordinance. The definition of rubbish and refuse is amended to include leaves and cut branches that are within public view, so that can be addressed accordingly. The definition of vegetation is added to include anything that is not defined as brush within the municipal code. And you'll see in the proposed ordinance, the reason for that is so that in the section of the code regarding obstructions of right-of-way, vegetation is added into those sections, so that if there is anything that is not brush, which would be a shrub or a tree, now to include vegetation, if the ordinance is adopted, if that is obstructing a roadway or a sidewalk, the owner of the property responsible for that vegetation or brush would then be responsible for removing that and ensuring that the pedestrian or vehicular pathway is clear. So those two changes, and then the definition of animal control officer is amended to include neighborhood services officer as a clarification. So that one's a little bit more straightforward than the last ordinance, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have on that one as well.
Trustee Hardy.
I compost, so does that mean I can only compost my grass clippings and no longer my leaves?
So with the municipal code, there's really rarely a hard line on anything. We communicate with the property owner to find out what the situation is, what's going on. If you have a compost pile and it's contained and you're maintaining that, that's different than having large piles of branches.
Or
that are
bags of leaves.
Or bags of leaves that have been accumulating over the past year. And so this is really intended to address yard waste that is accumulating in yards that is not being used for compost.
So if it looks like it's got a purpose, you'll look the other way.
Is it in your front yard?
Or in the alley.
If it's not visible, I'm not gonna bother you.
It's just outside my fence in the alley. It's a strip that I run my rototiller back and forth, which helps keeps down the weeds and vegetation that needs to be trimmed to a nice level behind my fence as well. So it's
Okay, you
doing
pointed
dual
to that.
purpose.
If it's
I read
not
the
a nice
word.
word.
So it's my intent is to keep the weeds down behind my fence line while also composting. So
Then I'll appreciate that.
okay.
And I do think, we've had this conversation a little bit before about code enforcement, right?
Are you talking about me and my big pile of
No.
branches?
We haven't had that conversation before. But, code enforcement, our goal is always compliance, not citation. Like, we would prefer never to cite anyone. Sometimes you have to get people to comply, but the goal is to get people to just be good neighbors, right? So
I had to call
there's
Christian once about
reasonableness.
my pile of branches. that
There
were
needs to be
getting-
reasonableness to our enforcement, right? And so if it's clearly somebody that's composting their yard waste and they're not doing it out in the middle of the alley or in their front yard, Teresa's not gonna be real heavy-handed, right?
Exactly.
She gets accused of being heavy-handed very regularly,
No.
but she's pretty reasonable in my opinion.
Most definitely.
I'll just leave a jar of honey out there so you can buy the look. They'll be, oh, honey.
Oh,
that's good."
honey, there you go.
Any questions? Comments?
Sort of, kind of question, differences between, say, like scrap wood, like after that windstorm, and firewood, say you have it stored off to the side. I guess it just kind of comes down to your discretion of like, obviously this is firewood, even if it's out front, or does that matter?
Well, it does, because you're not supposed to have the scrap wood out there. It's supposed to be shielded and kind of put away. It's just, you want to have it pleasing to the eye,
Sure,
right?
I totally agree, I'm just making sure like, oh, no, this isn't tree debris, this is
Right.
my
But now you're
firewood.
coming into building materials and lumber and things like that, so.
And I think there's some reasonableness too, right?
There
Like
is.
after a
Yeah.
storm, Teresa's not out the next day looking for branch piles in people's
No.
front yards.
Well, that's
When
where,
when it's 6 weeks after a
6 weeks.
storm and you still have a branch pile in the front yard,
well, that's where I called up Christian
That's-
one time
that's
because
when
I
there
got a
starts to be a
citation
different
for my
conversation.
big pile of branches 2 weeks before cleanup day.
yeah.
I got a citation saying cleanup day's in 2 weeks, and it's like, yes, I know, that's why there's a big pile of branches.
Citation
my
or
backyard.
letter?
It was a letter saying I should clean it up and
There's a
then
big difference.
There is
you should go take care of this, and I was just like, I am, I'm just waiting for cleanup day in 2 weeks.
Yes, and in situations like that with the lumber, it'll depend on the situation. An example is the windstorm that we had in mid-December with all of the branches that were scattered throughout the community, in front yards, along streets. We weren't out there the next day handing out letters and door hangers. We gave people time to address those issues. If it wasn't an immediate risk to the public safety and health, people were given time to address those things. If it was something, say, blocking the right of way, we would contact them right away just to make sure that there's a plan to get those removed, but with the intent to help them reach that compliance and not the intent to issue a citation.
So that's just where I encourage my trees to drop all their branches in the street so that Keith gets to come by and pick them up.
It's his favorite thing to do.
Exactly.
I've trained my trees to grow a certain
Cars,
way.
you're slash that.
It's okay, I know where you live, so it's like, I see the street, I put it in the right away, right, for you to take that
That's
out.
when someone drags it into my yard that drives me nuts. It's like, no, the tree dropped it in the street. I know.
She said, that's so nice, I know where you live.
Anything else? Okay, sounds like we're good to schedule this one too?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you
Thank
so
you both,
much.
really, Teresa, I don't think you hear it enough, but I really appreciate what you do.
Oh, thank you, I appreciate that.
It's
Did
good to
you
have a
ever
meeting.
tell you to move your trailer?
Even when you tell me to move my trailer. I got off the phone, I was like, oh, she's right.
I think we've all been visited by code enforcement. Anybody?
No, but that's what makes the town look better, so, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you both.
Thank you so much.
And now we'll jump right back to number 2 here, and that's Advantage Neighborhood Master Plan and Preliminary Plat. This is by our planner, Adam Olinger.
This is the next contestant.
And the price is ready.
Good evening, trustees. Shows the presentation on the screens.
It's on their screens. They can see it. I think she'll get it up on, there we go.
Perfect. So good evening. This is a public hearing request for a neighborhood master plan and, if approved, neighborhood master plan, a preliminary plat for the Vantage R3 and Tract O project. So this project is highlighted on the reds from this aerial view here. It's in 3 different spots. So up north, it is on a County Road 10E, approximately in line with Cuda Court to the left or to the west, and then just past the ditch to the right, or to the east, excuse me. And that extends down south past the ditch. Right now, there's that big pile of dirt sitting there. Part 2 is on the north side of Water Avenue. Right now, it's undeveloped land, but it's kind of where the street ends. That's paved right now. And part 3 is on the south side of Water Avenue, right across the street from part 2. So on the zoning map, as you can see, it is multicolored. The northern portion, part 1, is in the R3 zoning district. That's multifamily residential. The second portion, just north of Water Avenue in the center of the project, is in our R1 zoning district, which is single family residential. And then part 3 to the south there is also zoned R3 multifamily residential. As you can see, it is surrounded mostly by R1 zoning. This is all single family residential. The big splash of R1, that yellow that you see right in the middle of the screen, that's all Vantage. When it gets fully built out, that's Vantage filings 1 through 4, all throughout there. To the northeast, there's that tan colored PUD. That's the Berthoud Hollow PUD. Right now, it's vacant land. And then north of County Road 10E, obviously, is the Berthoud Lake Ranchettes, which are located in the county, which is why they aren't shown here, as well as the Enclave and Cuda Court, and then the Red Horizon subdivision and everything else in yellow up there. To the west of Vantage, you know, you've got the Loveland Reservoir, you've got the park down there that's soon to be developed. And to the south, it's obviously the rec center. For the preferred land use map, this area, part 1 up north, is slated to be the urban residential. That's that orangish peach color up there, to go along with the R3 zoning designation that it has. The central area, part 2, is that kind of green color, which is open parks and open space. And then the southernmost one is that, again, orangish urban residential. So to go back to it, that just kind of conceptualize what's going on in here and why it's all like that. So, like I said, they're doing a neighborhood master plan request and let me start with the neighborhood master plan request. It is for 130 new single-family detached and attached lots, a master plan for the neighborhood central park, and a creation of open space on 34.9 acres of land. They are also requesting a preliminary plat to build to create a buildable lot out of an existing tract to build a clubhouse in the park area in the central part of the project. So going back, what you see on your screen here is the concept plan that was approved just a couple years ago by the Board of Trustees. So back between 2016 and 2018, the board approved the Vantage subdivision, which includes over 693 single-family detached lots on 371 acres. So this concept plan was approved in 2017, in which what is now the R3 areas were called out as, quote, future multifamily parentheses townhouse, with the expectation that when they're ready to come plat, when the developer's ready to develop this portion, it comes back before the board to get approval for that. Since then, we've imposed the neighborhood master plan process, which is why they're back before you today with a master plan and not a plat. Since they're making changes to the master plan, they have to come back through with the master planning process. As you can also see on the northern portion up there, in that first part, the townhome part is only on the north end. The south of the ditch there is called out as oil and gas. That was a oil and gas well that was leased to the Vantage subdivision, and the lease has since expired before any drilling happened, so no oil and gas would be allowed there now. So getting into it, like I said, this depicts 130 single-family detached and attached residential lots. Up north here in this what is called Tract P, they're proposing duplexes that will be north of the ditch and single-family detached homes that would tie into the existing Vantage third filing south of the ditch. The duplexes access 10E in one location, lined up with Breckenridge Drive, and have fire turnarounds big enough for fire trucks on the eastern and western ends of the alley. They are alley loaded, so they front either kind of a 10E with a significant buffer, or they front the ditch to the south. And then on the south side, like I said, those are all single-family detached homes. They're all very similar or the exact same lot sizes as Vantage fourth filing just south of it, and it ties in with the existing street network by looping it around. In the central parts here, up top you have the park, which we'll get to a little bit more in a little bit. That's always been called out as the park area in the 2017 concept plan and our preferred land use map for our comprehensive plan. The southern port or the bottom portion here, south of Water Avenue, is again more duplexes. So these are all as well also alley loaded. These are alleys that feed into it. They line up with the to be constructed streets that are approved as a part of different filing advantage. They all have their access points through there. Again, on the western terminuses, they have wide enough hammerheads for fire trucks to be able to turn around. And then there's also some off-street, or there's street parking along each one of these streets, so the eastern street and the southern street, as well as a additional overflow parking lot at the end caps on the west side, and in the southeast corner, you can kind of see it down there right above the detention area. There's a little small parking lot for any overflow parking, for any visitor parking, for anybody else to alleviate the stress that this amount of homes places on the streets. So with the park, this is also part of the neighborhood master plan process. So like I mentioned before, this is north of Water Avenue. It has quite a number of amenities actually. So they have a 42,000 square foot turf area, a 63,000 square foot natural area, 2,000 foot loop walk, a big playground, an outdoor pool, a community building, restrooms, barbecue grills, benches, shade structures, you name it. It's a large park. It's was meant to be the central gathering space for all of the Vantage subdivision, and it's quite a big park, and it's got a lot of amenities. It also has off-street parking and a parking lot for visitors of the pool, visitors of dog park, visitors playground, as well as street parking along the street to the east. With no homes fronting it on either side, it shouldn't be an issue, or it should be a minimal issue on the future incoming residents. And with the fact that there are no residents there right now because these streets aren't paved and the houses aren't built, they should be able to know going into it that they're buying a house that has this large park across the street. So in addition to the neighborhood master plan, if you choose to approve this neighborhood master plan, you will also need to vote on a preliminary plat request. So this preliminary plat request, normally we would wait for a neighborhood master plan to be reviewed and then bring the preliminary plat back in a separate meeting. But because, as you can see here, this is a very, very minor preliminary plat, it just seemed silly to have to bring it back and make them wait another month to come back to you guys. So within this is initially platted as a tract. So a tract is something that usually typically have open spaces or parks or something else that you can't build any buildings in. The idea is that you can't build in a tract, you have to build in a lot. So because they're proposing community building within this area, they have to create a buildable lot from the tract. So, excuse me, that's what they're proposing to do here. You can see in the top right corner, that black outlined area, dark black outlined area, there's a lot that is where as well as an access easement, so that's where the parking lot would go, that's where the community building would go, and that's where the pool would go. So that would give them the ability to be able to build this proposed community building, of course, should you choose to approve the neighborhood master plan. If you choose to deny the neighborhood master plan, no action will be taken on this preliminary plat. They'd have to make revisions and come back with a new neighborhood master plan in the future. And so bringing back the preferred land use map, how the neighborhood master plan and the preliminary plat, line up with the preferred land use map. The urban residential allows for a little bit higher of a density. It promotes more of a neighborhood feel, an old, a pre-automobile revolution kind of development style. And while this plan doesn't necessarily depict that kind of feel, the townhomes or the duplexes, are more open space oriented. They're more, they got a little bit more elbow room than you would think in an urban residential feel. Staff feels that with their already a lot of density within the concept plan and the plans that they've been moving forwards with since 2017, it kind of emulates the urban residential plan enough. And then also the fact that they started working on this plan before the comp plan was adopted last summer. We feel that the higher density, the alley load lots, and then the allowance of the zoning district meets the general idea within this preferred land use map. Same with the ones to the south, and then obviously the park. It was depicted as parks and open space. It's been depicted as parks and open space since the concept plan was approved in 2017. That fits it to a T. So back on January 27th, the Planning Commission voted 5-0 unanimously to recommend approval of the neighborhood master plan, and then also conditioned on your guys' or the board's approval of the neighborhood master plan. The Planning Commission also 5-0 to recommend approval of the Vantage Fifth filing preliminary plat. So within the criteria, obviously, it meets all the criteria. Everything's pretty much to a T. It's on page 6 and 7 of your packet. If you have any questions, I can go over a little bit more in detail. Really, the only big things from that are the fact that in the public comment section, there was 3 public comments in your packet. Most of them dictated on the density and how that would impact the surrounding neighborhood. And staff, like a couple other projects that have come your way within the last 6 to 12 months, we've worked with the applicant to provide those off-street parking spaces and providing additional overflow parking spaces so it doesn't hound the rest of the community, whether that's in the park area and being able to have parking spaces for the pool, for the dog park, for all the amenities, whether that's in the duplex area to the south by providing the off-street parking in the bottom right corner of your screen or on the end caps, or whether it's in the duplex area in the north that has additional parking space on both the end caps, and then if you see on the right side, the south side of the street, there's that big extra parking space. There's the need for desirability. Staff feels, as you can see, especially from that zoning map, and you can kind of see it here, this section of Berthoud is just a sea of single family houses, and to be able to provide some different kind of housing types and different kind of density is a different set of house for somebody that's maybe looking for something different other than a single family home. It'd be a positive to the community, and be able to blend it well within the existing development is always a plus. So all in all, staff recommends a motion to approve the Vantage R3 and Tract neighborhood master plan, finding that it satisfies section 30-6-106B. And then, of course, if the board chooses to approve the neighborhood master plan tonight, staff also recommends a motion to approve the Vantage Fifth filing preliminary plat, finding that it satisfies section 30-6-107C. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to help. I think right now.
We got 2.
Trustee Hardinger?
One question that I remember having this back in when I was on Planning Commission was having some sort of pedestrian bridge over the path there, because it looks like there's a plan for that possibly, but there's no designation, because there's a nice big gap up on the north side between the townhomes, coming to the big gap in between the houses on the south side. So is there going to be any connectivity there?
So the ditch company is notoriously will fight you on every tooth and nail to not get the bridge over. Just to get the bridge over Berthoud Parkway for the trail that's going in over there on Berthoud Parkway was a year-long process and everything. If desired, it can be a recommendation that the applicant move forwards and negotiate with the ditch company to be able to get one. But with the fact that it has other pedestrian connectivity, so throughout the north side, or the south side of the ditch, the north side of those proposed single-family detached homes, it connects seamlessly with the trail that's going in on the north side of Vantage there that can connect you to Berthoud Parkway. Or to 10E, there will be a trail that goes along the south and east side of the ditch that connects to 10E.
We all know human nature is to take the shortest path
Of
possible,
course.
and I can see people trying to jump that. When it's dry,
That's big.
not when it's wet, but when it's dry, they'll be crossing it anyway, but.
I will say, I actually spoke to one of the representatives from the developers team today. They agree that it's a good idea, and I think they'd like to have one. We have to go through the approval process with the ditch company.
Okay. And then my next question is the thought process of putting a pool and a playground behind 3 houses' backyards. I guess this is kind of a comment versus a question, but did they think about putting it on the south side off of water?
From what I understand, the drainage drains to the south side of the lot there. So a lot of that open lawn area is drainage basin.
Okay, I'm just
It's
thinking
used with
about,
detention
we've already
stands.
moved pickleball courts in Berthoud Park because it's noisy. I can just imagine how loud that pool and playground's gonna be on a hot summer day with those 3 houses there and the field of complaints we're gonna get. Even though they know the park was there before their house was, it's still gonna spur complaints, so I'm just trying to figure out, would there be a better plan to possibly suggest moving that to the south side to buffer it more?
We can definitely ask the applicant for their feed on that too.
The questions?
Just a couple minor ones. Timing for the park, you make it sound like they're gonna put the park in first, so it draws potential homeowners.
So with the new subdivision new construction guidelines that was passed in November, they would have to put in the park whenever they're ready to develop that 5th filing. So if you approve the 5th filing, it could come in the next month, it could come a couple years down the line, it just
Just
kind of
prior
comes.
to,
I think the applicant would rather see it developed sooner rather than later, but I think that they can speak to that better than I could.
okay, and we keep talking about, and maybe I'm counting wrong, but this is higher density than what was approved in 2017, because
No,
it's lower, isn't it?
it's lower
Okay,
density,
all right.
yes.
But it's the townhomes, I think, that give the perception of higher density.
Okay,
It's a higher density than what's around it, but it's a lower density than what they were approved for.
Okay.
They were approved for townhomes, they're only doing duplexes.
all right, yeah, because I mean, there's less homes there, at least that's what I saw. And then one of the comments was, as far as widening or improving 10E, and I remember reading about that's part of the plan as well, is that correct?
So yeah, we don't know exactly how much will be needed. That'll be determined by the traffic study that they supply at the preliminary plat. Right now, they only have a general overview traffic study because it's only a master plan, it's only conceptual. When they get into platting for the townhome area up north, that's when you'll see the detailed traffic study come through that will be able to tell you exactly when or exactly what improvements will be needed and exactly what will happen.
Okay, that's all I have, thank you.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
So, coming back to 10E and the development on that north side, thinking about the proximity to Berthoud Reservoir, I think that a lot of people in that higher density area and the whole neighborhood are going to try and take advantage of that quick access. So with that, the ditch goes under the road, under 10E right there. And if I recall correctly, it's been a while since I've been there, but it's not really wide enough for pedestrians to
The bridge?
cross over that little bridge.
That is correct.
Okay, so is widening of that bridge part of, a consideration for pedestrians?
That again will be determined by the traffic study. So traffic study takes into vehicular, bicycle, and pedestrian traffic. So again, I'm not a traffic engineer, so I can't predict what it will be. But when that comes through, we'll have a definitive answer to your question.
Okay.
I think we all know that that's a high likelihood, and that's something else I spoke to the developer about today, about timing and how that bridge gets widened. But,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions?
I do. Because to the north, where the bridge is at there at Tenny, isn't that in the HOA neighborhood, the Longs Peak?
The birth of Lake Ranch Heads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Hoymes is kind of that little island down here right across
Yeah,
from that.
Hoyme is where the access point for the townhomes lines up.
So would the developer or the HOA to the north have to participate in widening that bridge if there's any improvements done to it?
That HOA is already built, so
So it's, we should have cut that back when that went in.
I don't think it was envisioned back when that went in. And that is also part of the county too. It's not annexed into the town, so.
Because I don't think they had to do any improvements on Tenny when they built that subdivision up there.
I do not know for sure, but I think they didn't do very much if they had to.
There's no sidewalk, there's no curb.
No.
Got one. And I guess this is also due to some of the public comments, and also because I'm not actually sure. This Vantage, is it under a metro district?
It is.
Okay.
It's a part of the same metro district that Heron Lakes is in.
With these new additions, is this going to be increasing any fees or any mills to the current residents that currently live there?
I think that is a good question for the applicant to answer.
The answer to the mill question is no. The mill levy doesn't change. They might have the ability to charge fees to the residents. That'd be a question for the developer, or actually really be a question for Metro District. You know, for instance, like the pool and Heritage Ridge, there's a fee for residents. There's a larger fee for non-residents.
Sure.
They could do the same thing here, but it won't change their mill levy.
Okay, so even if you already live here with this addition coming in, it's not gonna increase what you're currently paying?
Will not increase your property
No, we're aware.
taxes.
Okay. Okay, I guess the only other thing, and I guess this just ties back to sure would be nice if that north little satellite piece to this could get connected back to the rest of the development somehow. I can tell there's a trail all the way around kind of the backside to kind of link to the front side of it. I know there was talks of like possibly dragging a bridge across the ditch somehow, but I don't know, I guess to trustee, or sorry, Mayor Pro Tem's comment, you know, that there's no pedestrian area up there across that bridge as well. So I'm just talking out loud now. So I'll just stop, and that's all the questions I have.
We will be
Do
working
most
with the
people
developer to
talk
make
out
sure
loud?
there's a pedestrian accessibility on the bridge on 10E. The bridge over the ditch is something we'll work with them on as well, but we can't guarantee until we can work through the ditch company process.
Sure.
Any questions? All right, do we have the applicant?
The applicant should be online.
Yeah, Christine's online.
Oh, there was one.
I can give it to Ken. It's all good.
Hello. Are you guys ready for me?
We are trying to get. the
Okay,
volume.
perfect. How's the volume?
Good. We can hear you. now.
Perfect. All right, let me share my screen and we'll make sure we've got visuals working. Turning up my volume a little bit so I can hear you. All right, let me know if you can see the screen.
Not yet. Well, yeah, the board can, the audience can. Perfect.
Can you hear me now?
You guys all set?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. And if you need me to zoom in at any point, just let me know, I can do that. So anyways, thank you for your time tonight. I think I know most of you. My name is Kristen, I'm with TV Group, and I have actually been working on this project for a really long time. So it's exciting to see it move forward with the last couple of tracks that are available for development. I started on this project when it was East Haven and West Haven, so so before the Vantage name even started. And I know that some of you were around when Vantage came through and some of you were not. So I'm just gonna give kind of a quick overview of the big ideas of this subdivision because it was master planned. And so these areas that we're talking about tonight were incorporated into the goals for this subdivision. So quickly, just to orient everyone, this is located with the western boundary as Berthoud Parkway. County Road 10E is our northern boundary for a portion of the site, and then Bunyan Avenue is our southern property boundary. All right, and this is the overall plan. So you'll see we've kind of grayed back the full plan. Everything that you see in gray here, and I'm just kind of tracing around the property perimeter, it has already been through entitlement and is approved and or under construction or built. So all of this is part of the Vantage subdivision. And when we thought about this, we thought about where our higher density tracts were going to be located. And so we did locate some of them along in the center of the site and a couple of them up at the northern end of the site. Some of our big goals with the Vantage subdivision were open space, and there's pretty significant buffer that runs all the way around the perimeter of the property. And then also some spines that come up through the property. I'm sort of highlighting where one is here that runs all the way through the property that can provide connections. And then another really big idea for this site was pedestrian connectivity. So via right-of-way sidewalks, off-site trails. One of the things, and for folks that were here when we originally brought Vantage through that you might remember us having spoken about was that we really thought about how to design this site so that a kiddo that lives kind of, over on this side of the site could move all the way through the property via sidewalk or trail systems and get down to the southeast corner to head off to school without having to cross any major roads and really kind of staying in a safe pedestrian zone. So there are quite a few trails that are already platted as part of the original subdivision. And what I'll be highlighting for you today is where we're creating some of those final links to complete that trail system throughout this subdivision, which also connects to the perimeters and will provide good connections out to the rest of the community as well. So we're going to start at the very top. You guys had some great questions, so I will hopefully provide answers to all of them through this presentation. If there's anything that I missed, obviously I'll be here to answer questions, and we do have the rest of our team online as well, so we will hopefully have anyone you need to talk to get you those answers. So starting at the very north end of the site, we call this Tract N, and we've got a little key for you up in the top right-hand corner if you're ever trying to figure out where this is on the site. So the idea for Tract N, we decided to move forward with rear-loaded duplex lots. And as you'll notice here, we've got a little bit of a curve to this road. What we were doing is kind of mimicking the curve of the handy ditch here. And what that allowed us to do was create a little bit of variation to the streetscape, particularly along 10E, so nothing is going to look like a straight line or a wall of houses. And it'll provide a little bit more interest for the residents that live here as well. All of this product is rear loaded, which means what you've got along your streetscape and your open space are front doors opening out onto sidewalks, green space, park space, sidewalk systems, and trail space. So it's gonna give you that really nice pedestrian oriented feel without having driveway curb cuts that you have to navigate. You'll notice that we've also provided a small tot lot area up here. We do realize that this is a little bit farther away from the rest of the community. And so we wanted to provide a little bit of an amenity up in this area just for folks that may have small kids that can spill right out their front door and have something, within a minute or so of walking to that amenity area. So if we look a little bit closer, you'll see that we do have a trail system, or we have a sidewalk system that will run along 10E with that those improvements. You'll also see that we have a sidewalk system that wraps all the way around the lots. It'll come across, and you'll see the same system that kind of meanders along here. So we've got multiple connection points. Here's another connection point that comes from the back of this area up to 10E. So good connections throughout this area and up to 10E. And what we've done here is we are envisioning a connection along 10E, and then it will come down on the south side of the handy ditch and connect through Tract P. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And this came up, so I just wanted to expand on this a little bit more, but we would love to see a pedestrian connection across the handy ditch here. You know, ditch companies have different levels of comfort with how people utilize their space. It was really challenging for us to even be permitted to have a trail that runs along the handy ditch and not to have, I think they asked for like 6-foot tall chain link fences on both sides. So we had done a lot of negotiating to get this to feel open and, you know, have good view sheds and provide that trail. As you guys all know, it's pretty standard throughout northern Colorado and probably quite a bit of Colorado that our trails often run along the ditch systems and the river corridors. So this is totally in line with how development occurs in northern Colorado. So we're really glad that we're able to provide the trail on the south side of the ditch. We will continue to work and see if we're able to create that pedestrian crossing somewhere centrally through the site. But I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that the ditch does control whether or not we're permitted to make that crossing. So it's out of our control and we will certainly work towards it. But we're looking at that as a secondary option for pedestrian crossing. And at the very least, what we will do is make sure that we have a pedestrian connection right here to the south side of the site. So pedestrians here can use this sidewalk system and they'll be able to come down into Tract P. And this whole area, everything south of the ditch, is considered Tract P. So the idea for Tract P is, you know, we were looking at this and it's shown on the plans as an R3 tract for development. And the more we got into it and started working with space constraints and how everything felt, you know, when we tested other product type here, it really felt isolated and separated from the rest of the development. And what made more sense to us was to go ahead and just extend the streetscape and loop it around. It feels really natural to me, at least, that this is just like the completion of the single family detached portion of the site right here. So we think that, you know, existing neighbors here will feel really good about how this portion of the site develops. And it's just providing another opportunity for housing in here. So as you take this trail system down, you'll see that it travels down along the south side of the ditch. We've got connections down through the single family detached. It comes all the way up, and then you'll see what it's doing is it's connecting to an already platted and approved portion of this trail that runs along the rest of the northern property boundary out to Berthoud Parkway. So this is creating one of those links to create a full connection in the trail system from Vantage Parkway across the northern property boundary all the way up to County Road 10E. Then you'll also see that there's another spur that comes down the west side of Tract P. We've got another connection into the single family detached, and it continues to move to the south. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Give me 1 second, I'm just running through your questions to see if I hit everything up in this area. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. And this is Tract O, the Central Park. So that trail system that we saw coming from Tract P runs all the way through the open space areas here and then connects in right through here. So that trail system just continues to run from north to south through the subdivision. Tract O, we're really excited about. So this was always envisioned as the neighborhood park for this subdivision. It was always planned to be centrally located. As you can see, it's right in the middle of the site, and it's intended to kind of be equidistant to all 4 quadrants of this subdivision. We've got all sorts of great amenities here, which we think will be a really great addition to the subdivision and the community as a whole. You'll see that there's a pool, there's a community building, we've got playground areas, we've got turf areas, there's an area for dogs to run around, we've got trail systems that loop through here, there is off-street parking that is provided right here as well. So just lots of great amenities for folks to be able to use. And I think somebody asked about the timing for the park. And I know, you know, we're all probably used to, in general, how parks tend to come online after a fair bit of residential is already built. The reason that we brought forward that preliminary plat to create a lot line, which is right about here on the plan, is simply because this park is considered a high priority item for the development, meaning we would like to move this through right away. So we understand that the code requires it with fifth filing, but this is something that we would love to start moving through the process as soon as we can. It's an amenity that they would like to bring online right away. So just another bonus for the community to get that park going and to see the residential come behind it, which is opposite of how we usually see things. So that's kind of the big idea for the park. And then to address Mr. Hardy's comment about the pool and the clubhouse and the adjacency to the 3 lots. So we've actually got a fair bit of space between the pool and then the clubhouse is located kind of south of that pool. And I can totally appreciate the comment about the noise that may come from, you know, kids enjoying the pool over the summer. I actually live in a neighborhood with a pool in the center, and my kiddo's best buddy lives in the house right across from the pool. And they think that is the best thing ever. So, so what I would say is, you know, there's a house for everyone. And while there may be some noise associated with this, you could probably say the same thing about any kind of park or pocket park. And, you know, likely the person, since this park is hopefully going to come online before the residential is built, they'll be well aware of the amenities that are across the street from them. And hopefully we find someone who is targeting, you know, that's where I want to be. I want my kids to be able to spill right out the front door and across the street to that pool. So another reason for the location here is because of the grading and the drainage. This is where we have kind of an area that is sufficiently sized that we can make flat enough for this type of development. So it actually could not be moved to the southern section actually, because we have more grade in this area and we just can't. It's not constructible in terms of being able to put in a pool or a clubhouse in this location. So the site helped also designate where these type items needed to live within the park layout. All right, let's move on to our last tract here. And this is Tract A. So this sits centrally to the site, just south of the park. You'll see we've got Water Avenue to the north, Vantage Parkway to the east, and Lakeview Avenue to the south. Again, we're proposing the rear-loaded duplex lots here. So again, we will have those front doors and porches spilling out towards right-of-way sidewalk, green space, park space, no interruptions with driveway curb cuts. So that creates that really nice pedestrian feel, really safe for kiddos and bicyclists and your walkers. Then within the center of the site, we have the remainder of the buildings that are fronting onto green common areas. And the thing I think is really cool about these areas is they kind of feel like private parks for the folks that live in these buildings. So, you know, they'll be able to spill out, they've got some green space, maybe it's a place they can just hang out and read a book or throw a Frisbee, but it's a little bit more private. And while it's open to everyone, there's less likelihood that folks from the rest of the neighborhood are gonna travel back into this portion of the duplex development to utilize these spaces. So it really is a great amenity for the folks that are living in this area. And then if you look just to the west, you'll see, and it's all gray here, but again, we've got this green spine here, and this spine extended up right next to the park to the north, and it continues to the south. So we have mimicked that green spine on this side of the tract boundary, and it just continues to the south as well. So again, pulling in those components from the original master planning that were important to the overall development to these individual tracts. All right, so here's our overall, just so you can see everything together. Let's see here. I have a note on here about the widening of the bridge, and I think that the answers were covered, but essentially, you know, we understand that improvements are required and the pedestrian connection is required here as well, and that is all part of the process that we are working through with the town. Those details come at preliminary plat, but we understand those will need to be worked through, and that especially this tract N at the north end, we'll have to have figured those items out before it moves forward with platting. So we do recognize that. And there was a question about the Metro District as well, and so I believe one of the neighbor comments about that was, does the creation of this park limit the access that both the Heron Lakes and the Vantage residents have back and forth between amenities? And it absolutely does not. It just provides an additional amenity for everyone to be able to utilize. So with that, I think I've covered the big design ideas and hopefully answered a few of your questions. Again, really when we looked at this, we were looking at, how can we bring in this new product type? We knew the rest of the subdivision was single family detached. We knew this was going to be a slightly higher density product type. We really like the duplex lots here because they have more of a single family detached look. So in terms of visuals, they really look compatible, but they do allow that higher density. We really appreciate that duplex look up along 10E as well. We think that's a more compatible look to the existing residential that's across the street. The development of these tracks will allow us to expand the trail system, complete those links, and make sure all of those connections are now connected. And looped together so that all of the pedestrian and trail systems can be utilized as each new phase of Vantage comes online. And so that is where I'm going to leave it and open it up for questions and take it from there. Thank you for your time.
Hey, Trustee Hardy.
I'll start at the top. At the top, what kind of finishing will be done along 10E? Will that be mirrored what's on the north side, or will there be curb, sidewalk? On 10E up north?
Oh, do you mean the streetscape?
Yeah, how's the
Will
streetscape?
it be curb and gutter, or?
Is it just gonna be asphalt to grass, or is there curbing or sidewalk being put in? How's the south side of 10E being finished off up there?
Sure, that's a good question. Stephanie, if you're available to unmute and answer that, I believe it's being finished with curb and gutter, but she will be able to tell us for sure.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
You can.
Yes.
Okay, it took me a little while to get unmuted. We will be building our half of the street to the current berthed standards that are in place at the time. So right now, the current standard shows curb and gutter. And as long as that is still what berthed would like us to do at the time that we go to develop, that is what would be installed, is curb and gutter and a sidewalk.
Okay.
Tree lawn.
Tree lawn.
And a tree lawn.
Great.
Yep.
That was my question.
Next question, you mentioned the ditch company wanted a 6-foot chain link fence. Is there gonna be any sort of fence there for safety, whether it be a split rail, shorter chain link? What sort of things are gonna keep people from accidentally walking into the ditch?
Sure. No, there won't be a fence that will be required along the ditch. And so really we've provided some big open areas. We do have some, trees and plantings sort of along the edge to help deter folks. But, in general, people are going to walk where they want to walk, but this isn't going to be a very easy crossing necessarily. And there will be a robust trail system that is in place that will give folks a lot of different options of how to move through the site and make connections.
I'm just trying to think safety there, because ditches are nice attractants for young boys and girls these days. They like to go look
A
for
fence
that
doesn't
stuff.
keep you out.
I know,
It
but
doesn't.
Loveland
It really doesn't.
Other
fences
places they
didn't stop
don't.
me. All right. Has there been any chance or talk that they would help or allow if we can get a bridge, but also maybe do something decorative to the ditch, or are they pretty, like, stay 5-10 feet away from my ditch, don't touch it?
So to date, they have really not wanted any work to happen around the ditch. So we haven't had any type of conversation that has had anything to do with decorative bridges or any, like what it may look like. We really are just working on can we get a ditch crossing? So yeah, it's really more about the feasibility of being able to have a secondary pedestrian access in addition to the trail access that we're proposing up at 10E, and not quite to the point of how things might look.
Okay. And then next question is about oil and gas. I know that was a pad up there that was designated for future drilling, but isn't there a abandoned wellhead in this subdivision, or?
There is not. Thank you for bringing that up, because I made a note of that and then I forgot to bring it back up. So I know that oil and gas is a sensitive topic, and so I want to make sure that this is perfectly clear. So previously, an oil and gas company did have a lease or a right to potentially explore that portion, Tract P, which is this area right here. That lease expired before they decided to move forward with anything. So there is no existing oil and gas. There's nothing that's plugged and abandoned. It was just a lease that never moved forward. Oil and gas companies do that quite a bit, where they kind of hold the right to a property, and then they have to decide within a certain time frame if it's something that they want to move forward with or not.
Okay. And then I'm gonna go back to the pool and park question again, and the grade being on the south side. Is it just a fear that all the water would run off the park and fill the pool with mud? Is that the issue, or is it really just about trying to keep something flat? Because you can build townhouses across the street, but can't build a pool on the other side of the street. So I'm just trying to get, I mean, I drive out there, ride by there, and I'm just trying to picture how flat does it have to be to build that pool?
Sure. Well, we do need a fairly significant area to be flat for both the clubhouse and the pool. The detention is located right down here, and water is going to go where water wants to go. So engineers can definitely do some amazing things, but we can't necessarily flip our detention to the top of the site. We'd be pumping water uphill. So this is where the detention would live. And so there will actually be a drop down from the road into the detention areas, and then it comes back up the site as you move to the north.
So it's more about having the detention pond and not so much the pool filling up with water from.
Oh yeah, it has nothing to do with the pool filling up with water. It's that the flat developable area is located in this northern portion of the site, and the detention and the depression in the site is located in the southern portion of
Because my
Tract.
thought for making the suggestion of moving the pool is more to the southwest corner, not to the southeast corner. So
yeah, detention is really going to run all the way along this road right here.
I can actually provide more clarification if you'd like.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, so this, the south side of that tract was previously planned with the second filing of Vantage to be a regional detention pond for that whole, not the whole north area, but a good portion of the Vantage subdivision. So that pond area along the whole south half of the site that's just already a part of a master plan for Vantage. And so we did design it to have a lower portion of the pond that would get inundated more often with, your typical rainstorms. And then the upper portions of the pond would be inundated less often. And we've got some areas of like shallow ponding that would normally just be lawns. So we're utilizing that space for some of our lawns in the dog park, but it's during a major storm event, there may be some shallow ponding.
Okay. I'm just trying to think of solutions here. One, like even trying to put the clubhouse on the north side of the pool to butt up backyard to backyard for the houses and put the pool south, but I'm overthinking it. I'll move on.
Other questions?
I appreciate the comment though, thank you.
I'm gonna tag team off of Tim here. Is there even a possibility of moving that whole section to the north, maybe another 30, 40 feet, whatever, and just add more buffering?
Carly, do you want to tackle that one? We're just waiting for her to be unmuted.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question one more time?
I mean, I like the way this looks, but is there a possibility of just moving everything however far, 30, 40 feet, and just add additional buffering? I know that, you know, this is gonna go in before those homes are built, but there's always an argument when somebody moves by an airport, so I would guess this same thing would happen here. Is there any way that you could, would that be possible to move that however many feet and then just add a lot more buffering?
We do have at least, I would say 30, 40 feet between the property line and the fence line of the pool, because we're able to get a row of evergreens along the property line. And then we have a 6 or 8 foot wide sidewalk, and then another 10-foot planting area. So we do hope to already buffer that area with lots of evergreen trees to help minimize the sound. We kind of looked at the site, and I mean, if we could further look at it with the civil and see if there's any way to possibly move it more, but I know that that is encroaching in on their, I think it's the 100-year flood line, and so, you know, I'm not really sure how much they can allow us to move more south and still maintain the area they need for their detention. It would be something we would need to look at, and she would have to like run the numbers and stuff. So I don't know, Stephanie, if you want to chime in as well. Yeah, I can do that. So yes, Carly is right. There is the 100-year water surface line that we've been trying to kind of stay out of. There is, I guess, options to flip the pool and the community center with the parking lot. But when I look at that, I don't think that that's necessarily a better option to have cars pulling into people's and shining their lights into people's backyards. So I really do think with the programming, this ended up being our best layout. And Carly's right, there is quite a bit of space on that northern side, and with the planned landscape, that does cut down on sound quite a bit to have thicker type landscape like those evergreens.
Yeah, I guess it
I
would
wanted
be.
to add a couple of things really quickly as well, and I think sometimes it's a little bit hard to see. Let me go back to the overall plan, because the original vantage is grayed back, but keep in mind that this right here is the road. So the houses are actually going to be sitting up near the road, and this is actually backyard that is backing to the pool. So you're naturally going to have a pretty significant buffer across that backyard as well, from the house, as well as a privacy fence between these lots and this pool area. So just something to keep in mind, because sometimes it feels like maybe these are fronting on the park, and it's actually backyards. Another opportunity that we have, you know, I think Carly and Stephanie have conveyed that, you know, we're somewhat restricted in how we can move things around on the site due to detention and floodplain lines. But we do have a little bit of flexibility with these 3 lots as well, where we could actually move the rear lot lines, shorten them up just a little bit, to create an additional landscape buffer between the Tract O boundary and the rear property lot lines for these 3 lots here.
That might be an option. I don't know, you know, how much that's gonna change as far as, you know, what the decibel level is or that type of thing, but that and is there any idea to tell where that 100-year floodplain line is?
I don't know if we can see it on this plan. We can't see it on this plan.
Okay, I think we beat that horse long enough. All right.
Okay.
The-
They're good
the-
comments, though. It's good to talk through these things so that we can get to the best possible plan.
The other thing is, I know that, and Chris will scold me because he always scolds me when I say this, but
I do not.
there's a max limit on height of 40 feet. What are the proposed story levels of these, of all of the units? Are they just at max 2-story?
Do you mean the clubhouse building for the park?
Clubhouse, the homes, I mean, all of the,
Oh,
yeah.
sure.
All of it.
So regardless of what you're talking about, whether it's the clubhouse or the homes or anything like that, they will all meet the requirements of the code for height limits.
Which could be 3-story?
I do not know the height limits off the top of my head.
What's that?
They're all 2-story houses out there, I thought.
And so then there is the transition thing as well.
I think the only area where you might see where the code might allow more than 2 stories might be the R3, and I need to double check too, because I don't recall the height limitation for R3.
I can tell you that in the R3 areas, we are proposing traditional 2-story duplexes.
Yeah,
That's all I wanted to hear.
They
Thank
won't be
you.
3-story, I don't.
Perfect.
And so I am done.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
I would say with the pool, I'm pretty happy with the way you guys have mitigated it with plantings and the trees and such. Is the fencing going to be also some sort of fencing that will reduce noise mitigating fence material?
For the pool or
Yes.
for the rear lot lines?
For the pool.
Carly, I'm gonna look to you for an answer on that one.
Yeah, no, it's just a regular wrought iron fencing that you see typically
Okay.
around pools, yeah.
Okay, and
The 6 foot tall.
Often for fencing, a more open type fence is preferable because it allows, eyes on the area and good visibility, and that's usually something that is sought after in a pool area.
because I'm just quite honestly thinking about, if you do want to mitigate the noise, additionally, more of a solid fence or a fence with, surfaces that are conducive to reducing echoes might be helpful, just throwing that out there.
Just on the right side of the building, on the building
Yeah.
itself.
So that's fine. Like I said, the pools are of limited use during a limited period during the year, and it is 3 lots that back to it, so I'm not as concerned. We have a pool in my neighborhood, and it's actually more quiet than you would think it would be. So next is the architectural standards for these homes. We were, in the initial phase of Vantage, we're a little surprised to see the backside of the homes that face Berthoud Parkway. And I know in the future phases, the ones that back to Berthoud Parkway are going to have 4-sided architecture. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct.
That is correct.
Okay, and so these homes that are going into these new areas, will they also have 4-sided architecture for anything that faces trails or open space?
Everything that is proposed will meet all of your new architectural standards.
Excellent, okay,
They'll meet our new architectural standards.
great,
Everything that was
okay.
passed last year.
Okay,
Yep.
great. My last question is, you have a significant number of trails that are not necessarily along roads, which is really great. I think that is fantastic. My question is, are any of them soft surface or are they all cement
That is a great question.
or concrete?
So there is a mix of hard and soft surface trails as part of the Vantage approved plans that are already in place. And I will be honest with you, I can't remember what's what off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look. Right now, we are just showing trails generally as part of the neighborhood master plan, but our intention would be to kind of match what we're connecting to. So obviously, you know, I believe, for example, I'm pretty sure this northern one is a concrete trail. So we would match that and continue the concrete trail. But I really like to see a mix of the different trail types, you know, that move through the site. So folks have an opportunity to use different types of surfaces. So as we would get into final plating, we would be calling out the different trail types in different locations. We try and put highest use as concrete, obviously, and then, you know, kind of a secondary use as a soft surface trail.
I might request that the developer consider some sort of loop that is completely soft surface. I mean, that's just a personal pet peeve of mine, is that most of the trails going in are concrete, and soft surface is often sought out for many people with, you know, who cannot or prefer not to walk or run on a concrete. So I just throw that out there as a request or a suggestion that there might be some loop that's all soft surface. And other than that, I really think you guys have done an excellent job putting this together. Oh, that's a comment. Never mind.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
We get in trouble for that.
Yeah.
We haven't heard people's comment yet, so can't really have an opinion yet, so. So the single-family detached, you have a trail along the ditch, south side of the ditch that goes all the way up to Tenney, which is great. And there's a gap there on the northeast corner where the trail connects from the loop street up to the north-south part of the trail is a little spur that connects to the street to the trail along the south side of the ditch, so that's awesome. You know, that looks to me like that would be a good place to have the bridge over the ditch. So on the north side of that ditch in Tract N, there's a gap between the two east duplexes. Is that an outlot, or are those, like, could that be a future trail connection if?
Are you talking about here or here? Or somewhere? This?
Right there, yeah. Can that be a future trail connection if there was a bridge to line up with the trail on the south? Or is
I
that private
believe
property?
this is a utility corridor. Is that correct, Stephanie?
Yes, it is a utility corridor, but we have trails and utility corridors, you know, fairly often.
Well, we're dealing with a trail that was supposed to be a pedestrian connection from 20 years ago, and it was dedicated, platted as a utility easement. So I think it would be great to have that reserved for future pedestrian connection if a bridge can be negotiated with the ditch company.
Yeah, and this would be a great location right across from the rest of the trail system.
Yeah, so if we could just make sure that it's platted correctly, so that's an open option for the future. And then the trail on the north side of the ditch dead ends at the parking area. Is there any reason why that can't continue over to Tenney along the ditch?
This right here?
Yeah, the trail the trail takes a hard left into the parking area. Is there, yeah, where the cursor is, can you just continue the trail along the ditch up to Tenney?
Yeah, and I have to double check our plans. We may not have caught it on the rendering. I'm pretty sure it connects across, but we would have the opportunity to take this up to Tenney as well.
Yeah, I think that's important because if it dead ends at the parking area, the only way to get out of that parking area looking at this plat would be to go back to the west and go up the street. So I think having a trail connection from the end of that parking area up to Tenney would be great for the connectivity to Berthoud Reservoir. And then similarly, is there any opportunity for a trail connection on the south side of the ditch, east of the houses, the new houses, right? Yeah, is there any way
over here?
Yeah, is that an opportunity, or is that just dead end in a backyard?
Well, we'd have to look at that more closely. We do have detention that will be located in here, so we'd have to make sure that we could make it work grading wise. But it does dead end into a backyard, and I'm pretty sure we don't have any trail connections right back through here. I think our trails along this eastern property boundary start south of Little Cone Drive. So I think it would be a trail to nowhere.
Yeah, that's fine. That's it.
Other questions? All right, at this time, I'm gonna open up the public comment portion of the hearing. If you could please state your name and address, keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, okay? And please know we won't be able to respond until the hearing is over. We have no one signed up in person. Do we have anyone online, clerk?
Mayor, we do not.
Okay, I will close the public comment portion, bring it back to the board. I think that's a good sign. Any final questions, thoughts?
I do have one more, because it's so far off to the right. There's a pond up there in the northeast corner that's in that different property.
Yeah.
Is there any plans over there to make sure that's separated? Is it fenced off from the other property owner? What's its accessible, like, to the neighborhood?
No, there's no fencing over there. The pond is located outside of the property boundaries, and as you can see, there's really no development that's proposed in this area as well. This area here will be serving as detention for the Vantage subdivision as well, so it's not going to be conducive to folks walking along the property boundary right in this area. It's probably going to be a little boggy, and it won't be the nicest place to be. Again, the trails are kind of located where we want pedestrians to go. We know we can't control that 100%, but it really does help direct the majority of the foot traffic, so that we're getting folks, where we want them to be and avoiding the areas we don't want them to be.
Just wondering, because water's always attractive, so.
Okay.
And then on Maureen's thing about soft surface trails, if they don't build them, the people will. They always seem to appear on the side of the cement trails eventually, so.
Okay, so right now we've got the recommendations, bridge over the handy ditch, and the location would be over that utility easement. Recommendation to move the pool over to the south side of the park, minimize noise to the houses. And let's see, soft surface loop, okay? And then North Development have the trail by the ditch extend all the way to 10E.
Mayor?
Yes.
As far as back on the noise, and Maureen, or Mayor Pro Tem Dower inadvertently asked as far as fencing along the north side of the pool, and then the response was, what about the fencing at the back of those 3 lots? Is there any way we could do like privacy fence along those 3 lots to mitigate noise?
Those will be privacy fence.
They will be? Okay. All right, so that would have been another recommendation, but since it's happening, I really recommend it.
All right.
Well, then my other concern about noise was the building, I'm afraid, would act like an amphitheater, and just reflect that sound back up towards those houses too. So that was the other concern I had about the building just being a reflector of noise.
Okay, let's change that recommendation up to noise mitigation or moving structures. Site.
I don't know.
Do you want to cite the house and the pool?
I still think the pool needs to be moved south.
But I don't.
I don't either.
I don't either.
Okay.
I don't think
let's
beat it enough.
Let's nick that one. Okay, so anything else? Developer soft service trail, North Development have trail by ditch, extend to 10E. Anything else? Okay, so the motion would be to approve with the recommendations of bridge over the ditch, the location over the utility easement. Developer consider a soft surface loop, in the North Development have trail by the ditch extend to 10E.
So moved.
Okay, do we need to read the rest of that?
Or maybe we do need to read the rest of it.
That satisfies.
All right, so I'll read that off.
Yeah, just a quick comment. So on the soft surface loop, I think soft surface is pretty limited in terms of what type of transportation can go on it. So I think, as we'll see in our Trails Master Plan that's next upcoming on the agenda, it's much better to just have, as Tim was alluding to, the edges of the trail have a 2-foot soft surface shoulder, as opposed, because right now, like down in Heritage Ridge, there's a really nice loop that is good for handicap or skateboards or rollerbladers or bikes, and then there's the crusher fine along the railroad tracks that is basically for walking only. So I think it's much better, instead of just having a soft surface loop, I think it'd be better to have shoulders on the paved trails that are soft surface, so people that want to jog on softer terrain can have it, but it doesn't limit kids on skateboards or.
Well, the thing is, all the
Right.
sidewalks are going to be there right against all the roads with a tree lawn, so there's there's a ton
I'm
of.
just saying, I would hate to see any of these trails mapped on this map, soft surface only, because I think that would really limit the use and the connectivity.
I'll just throw out there that over in Heritage Ridge, the soft surface trail gets extensive use. There's a ton of people on it, where there are not as many people on the sidewalks. So again, the developer can do, it's just a recommendation. It's by no means a requirement that they put in a soft surface loop. However, if a soft surface trail were specifically put in on the side of a concrete trail, I think that would be fine, but I wouldn't want to sacrifice soft surface trail for more concrete when there are so many sidewalks already existing.
So you're saying the intent of that, your suggestion is not to replace any of the mapped trails and make them soft surface only, just to add a soft surface option in addition to what's shown?
No, I would say if a loop makes sense and there's small sections here and there that are behind houses, that seems to make a lot of sense. That might be a good location for a soft surface trail, since there are streets, sidewalks everywhere else that bicycles, skateboards, etc. could go on. Anyone else have an opinion on that?
I like the dual use. I mean, I really do. It's not limiting. It appeases everybody. I don't think there's any reason to do one or one or the other when that could be an option. Is it to the developer, is that an option? Could we do a whatever? Are those 8-foot trails?
Spacing, that would be the only
Maybe do
limitation.
6-foot trail and then 2-foot soft surface on the side. Is that a possibility?
Less cement.
Unless they were planning on a 4-foot.
So our trail standard is greater than 6 feet. I mean, that's basically a sidewalk, so I wouldn't consider that a trail. But
I don't think we would have to go on a trail. I think adding a soft surface shoulder to a trail is a really inexpensive option. And
if I may also mention, the idea of a loop trail is really more appropriate in the context of the overall master plan for the subdivision and not necessarily the tracks we're discussing tonight.
This is true.
So,
Yeah.
I think we can work with the developer to see if there's an appropriate place for recreational kind of soft surface trail loop, either adjacent to existing concrete trails or somewhere else. I think that I agree with all of you. I mean, soft surface trails are desirable. So are hard surface trails in the appropriate places, and typically the soft surface is more of a recreational focus than transportation focus, although the concrete serves dual use. But anyway, again, I think we can talk about that with them anyway, and I think there's some good sense to that. But in the context of this approval, it's probably not
It's not appropriate.
necessary in this case. Because we're looking at a small portion of this development, not the whole thing.
I'm cool with that.
Okay, so the recommendations are to explore soft surface trails. North Development have a trail by ditch extend to 10E, and then also over the ditch using with a bridge over the ditch and using the utility easement.
I move to approve Vantage R3 and Tract Neighborhood Master Plan, finding that it satisfies section 30-6-106B of the Berthoud Municipal Code with the stipulations that there is
A bridge over the ditch.
a bridge over the ditch,
Location of the utility easement.
with the reserved trail on the location of the utility easement,
And then the trail by the ditch extend to 10E.
and the trail by the ditch extended to 10E,
And to add soft surface trails.
and to consider adding soft surface trails.
And maybe rather than stipulations, those are just recommendations.
Recommendations.
Second.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem has moved. Who was that, Trustee Stevens?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any final discussion?
Just a quick comment. So, you know, we have a long history with the handy ditch. We do a lot for the ditch, just by virtue of our contract, right? We wet the ditch, even though we don't use it for supplying our drinking water for the most part. So I would like to see, I would hope that the town staff can aid the developer in negotiating with the ditch company and help facilitate that conversation in the bigger picture of the other issues we're working with the handy on. You know, 20 years ago, the board actually, before the pipeline to Carter Lake, the board was, the town was dependent on the handy ditch to get water to the reservoir during the irrigation season. It had to last all winter, and the ditch was in poor repair for miles to the west of town, and it was potentially going to impact the town's water supply. So there was a time when we, you know, offered to fund ditch maintenance at the town's expense for the handy ditch company. So I think we have a history of being a good partner with them and working with them, and I would hope that we can kind of help leverage that and help the developer get an agreement with the ditch company, both on the bridge on 10E and also on this crossing. You know, I don't see a downside to having a bridge with a railing over the ditch, and to have this higher density connected with the southern development would make a huge difference.
I agree. It's the ribbon. It's the bow on the package.
We agree with all of that.
Okay, cool. We have a motion that's been seconded. Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Trustee Hyman,
Yes.
Trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Cartwright.
Yes. Okay, since that was approved, there's
Do it-
another
do
motion
the-
here.
Yeah, I'll make this the next motion. I move to approve the Vantage Fifth filing preliminary plat, finding that it satisfies section 30-6-107C of the Berthoud Municipal Code.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem has moved. Trustee Stevens has seconded. Any final discussion on that? Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Hyman,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Mayor Cartwright.
Yes. Okay, board want to move right into the next agenda item? Okay, let's take a
Thank you
5
very
minute-
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Take a
I presented to you several near-term improvements in and around the water plant, dealing with the plant itself and the raw water supply. The package that's before you today was the first of those. A design put together by CDM Smith for improvements to the influent lines going into the plant to facilitate mixing. Be able to, for our operations team to mix influent water, and the main mixing would be either the main raw water flow line coming in from Carter Lake, or mix that with water from Berthoud Reservoir. It included a system of powdered activated carbon that would facilitate mixing and producing a slurry, a pack, that would be fed into the influent, lines going into the water plant. And then lastly, improvements to the backwash system. And those would be various piping and control in order to facilitate supplying backwash water from the existing elevated tank as opposed to from the existing distribution system the way it's done right now. And so that was the package that was put out to bid. It was advertised on the 7th of January. We had very active communications with multiple contractors, a lot of Q&A. I issued an addendum open bids earlier this month and got 4 bidders. We were pleased with the range of the bids, how the bids were clustered together. And of course, the low bid was lower, much lower actually than our most recent engineer's opinion of probable cost on that. So definitely feel like that's a good sign. As you can see in the recommendation letter from CDM Smith, they did a pretty thorough review of the apparent low bid contractor, Aslan Construction, and followed up on the references that were actually, those references were supplied by Aslan, and those were all good references, and they found them to be legitimate and positive, very positive. In addition to that, and kind of not part of the formal recommendation letter, I've got experience working with Aslan Construction, as does CDM Smith. And you know, a good experience working with them. Both of us have. They went back and talked to their project manager who has worked with them. So basically, this is a pretty straightforward process at this point. We got a bid that's within our budget. It's under the engineer's estimate. And the contractor is solid, well, reputable, provided the bonds, the bid bond that we needed, and is anxious to take on the project and is anxious to get started on it. And then kind of as a plus, it is a local contractor that is headquartered in Berthoud itself. I'm recommending, and as was my design engineer, CDM Smith, that we award this contract to Aslan Construction Incorporated.
Thank you. Questions?
So Ken, we got I believe most of the water customers got a letter in the mail recently. Are these improvements designed to solve that problem, or is it unrelated?
Unrelated. The letter in the mail recently, I believe the one I think there's been only one. Yes, there was only one, and it was related to the distribution system in a clerical task that is required by the state as part of operating the distribution system to report on the testing that's being done on the backflow and cross-connection prevention devices in our system.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? All right, thank you. Since this is kind of a bigger number here, I'll open it up to public comment if anyone in the audience wishes to speak to this, particularly online.
Mayor, there is nobody online.
All right, thank you. I'll bring it back to the board. Everyone feel good about this?
Yes.
Awesome. I think it's great. It's Aslan. Is there a motion here?
Move to award the 2022 Water Treatment Improvement Project contract to Aslan Construction, Inc.
I'll second it.
Trustee Grace has moved, trustee Hardy has seconded. Any final discussion on this? Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Trustee Hyman,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Mayor Carpenter.
Yes. Thank you, Ken. It's great that
Thank
we
you,
have
guys.
local business too. It's fantastic. All right, our final agenda item tonight is the Trails Master Plan presented by Keith Knoll.
Thank you, Mayor Carspec. Last fall, the board approved the open space master plan. That plan came in under budget, so the opportunity came to continue working with Jeremy and Christina from Logan Simpson to update the 2018 Trails Master Plan. This plan went through the similar process. Jeremy will go through all that with public input. The Port Committee at the last February meeting approved the plan to be presented to the board, and that's what we're looking for tonight is board approval of the Trails Master Plan. So this time I'll welcome Jeremy Cole with Logan Simpson to present the plan.
Great, thank you, Mayor, trustees. Great to be with you again. And it's been wonderful, even during the cold weather, to see the community being outside on the parks and trails for fresh air, for respite, for the mental health, for exercise. And we thank you so very much for your support for the new Berthoud Recreation Center, for the Wagner Park improvements, for the ongoing design work on the new town bike park, the town park, new amenities at Richardson Park. Boy, there's just so many activities going on right now, and it's a great time to live in Berthoud. I'd like to give you this 7-minute presentation on a 20-page master plan and cover the following topics. And the need for the plan is fairly evident. You can see on this image some of the common occurrences around town as we grow to be able to finish the connections. One that I'll call out here is improving intersection and railroad safety with safe routes for school. Many of the students on the east side of the railroad there cross to go to the high school on the west side. And this master plan does all of these things. It improves design standards, neighborhood connectivity, makes trails more consistent, maximizes regional trail corridors, and builds on the new comprehensive plan, the open space plan, and the transportation plan. We've had great support for the plan and its priorities so far. You can see that the types of engagement we've had. Again, Port has been very involved. Several of you participated in our one-on-one interviews. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing this with your neighbors. Some of the feedback that we've heard so far through the draft plan process was the importance of maximizing connectivity of the trails to bike lanes and sidewalks and within the neighborhood circulation, universal design or accessibility between the different systems, north-south connections to Loveland down to Longmont. There's good support for the Little Thompson Trail and other recreational trails in the region. Seasonal closures at Heron Lakes came up. That's an important resource that we don't want to impact by creating recreational access into sensitive wildlife habitat. There was feedback about further improving the maintenance and development requirements, about widening the trail corridors for more open space type experience and others. So with that, we folded those in and Port gave the recommendation. And let me just give you a few highlights about the plan. 5 goals: healthy, right, accessible, economic development, recreation, and experiences. That's what we're striving for. And in the solid lines show the existing trails, and this includes many of the trails have been built since the 2018 plan, and many of those recommendations in 2018 have now been accomplished. So a great time to update the plan and look even further beyond than what we did. The dashed lines then are those that are proposed for the future. And you see in purple the regional trails, largely along drainages, and north-south up to Loveland. Existing, neighborhood trails that are in orange and dashed to build out that neighborhood connectivity. We also showed as a a star on the map with a circle where some trail crossing improvements might be along barriers like 287 Berthoud Parkway and the Road. We have three new and improved classifications for trails: regional trails, which are wider, have more of that open space experience, and have a soft surface trail adjacent to it, down to a neighborhood trail and a soft surface trail. These are found on pages 10, 11, and 12 on the printed plan in your packet. You'll find that these three trail sections are very versatile, and they'll do exactly what you were just talking about with the Vantage proposal, where sometimes you'll need a soft surface trail, sometimes you'll want a regional or neighborhood trail. And when trails are on a property brought in for development review, then the developer is responsible to install or build those trails. The majority of the trails will be built by developers. And in Berthoud, which limits your fiscal impact. HOAs or metro districts are also responsible to maintain all of the trails within their developments, which further reduces your costs. And so the dollars that you have through the 1% sales tax appear to be adequate to build out the full trails plan with developers doing their portion. That's a great place to be at for a growing town. You'll see a number of priority ones here in the action plan at the end. No surprise, because these are such popular facilities. We're trying to build them as fast as we can and had a record year this last year. The port has been focused on completing those north-south connections. And in a very short time, you'll be able to leave Town Hall on an e-bike or cross-country skis and get all the way to downtown Fort Collins, and from there up to Berthoud, up to Bellevue, and all the way to Greeley without ever leaving a trail. And I think that's phenomenal. So I'm so excited for that. I know that Keith has ordered some extra large scissors for each of you for the upcoming ribbon cutting. So there's also some longer term trails. Trails can take decades to build out the whole system. We know you have the vision, but it does take patience, time to see that. This coming summer, they hope to finish the last half mile of the 40-mile Poudre River Trail. It's taken almost 40 years to do this 40 miles. So it takes time, but it's such a great project. One question that comes up often in looking at that master plan with the trails on it is how do these trails cross undeveloped private land? And the answer is that the town always cooperates with willing property owners and never forces a trail across undeveloped land. So just sometimes it takes time, decades, to make those connections happen. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have about the trail master plan.
So just a real quick one, Jeremy, on the map, so that the last board meeting, and I believe it is on here, the suggestion was made to add a trail north-south on First Street through the new Innovation District. It looks like that got added.
It did.
So that's great. And then the other question at the board meeting was, what are our trash can facilities requirements for HOA trails compared to town trails, because there's a perceived lack of services in the Heritage Ridge trails.
So it's currently, they're required to have trash cans in parks, right, open space amenities.
But not on the trails.
Not on the trails. We wrestled around with every 2,000 feet, every 20. Once we started doing that, we didn't have that same in our system. So
what are our standards for our trails compared to the HOA trails?
No specific standards, just where we think a trash can should go. It's usually the reservoir is the last kind of bigger trail we put in, and I think we noticed a couple up in the entrance and then one on that south side.
Okay. Well, there was debate at court as to whether or not what was normal, what was not normal, how necessary was it. You know, somebody who's going to litter is going to litter whether there's a trash can there or not, as opposed to put it in their pocket. Same thing with dog owners and their picking up after their dog. So anyway, I just promised that I would raise that question, and if we needed to have any of those standards in this, you know, we would want to add them, but it sounds to me like we don't really have a specific criteria, or there isn't really a specific criteria. Plus, you know, somebody has to service those if we put those in, so. That was it.
One thing I'll add that is not included in this document, but I think is relevant to the conversation. And I'm not even sure I've mentioned this to Jeremy, but the CSU engineering department, I think I may have mentioned this to the board before, but their senior students are required to do a senior project, and they look for community design opportunities. So they're currently studying and will do a conceptual 10% design of an undercrossing of 287 at Berthoud Parkway. So that we can take that 10% design, run it past CDOT and get their feedback, do some initial cost estimating. But it's kind of a neat opportunity for us to look at that opportunity and see what it might take. And they were pretty creative and worked with our engineers from Baseline Engineering that do our development review and some of our capital project management. But creative in coming up with some potential solutions to problems I didn't know existed. So anyway, it's just kind of a neat little addition here, but just thought I'd mention it while we were talking about trails.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that ties into my question, which is gonna be regarding Prairie Star over to the Berthoud Reservoir, that there's always that, working with the railroad and seeing if we could get into that underpass. Is that, then you are, you know, developers built out Prairie Star, we've done Berthoud Reservoir, we just need that connection, and then they can get through that way too, if need be.
Yep.
Without having to cross the street.
And from an undercrossing standpoint, we're also in the design of Richardson Park, which is at about 10% design phase. In fact, I just got an updated rendering yesterday. We're making sure that we're not going to design an undercrossing right now. As you know, we received a grant for an enhanced pedestrian crossing with, you know, like traffic arms and lights and pedestrian activated buttons and all that stuff. So that's exciting. That should go in next summer. But we are still designing, we're looking at conceptually where would an undercrossing go at Richardson so that we don't plan anything in the way, right? So that we reserve that space. So there might be an opportunity for an undercrossing at the trail along Berthoud Parkway over to Richardson in the future.
I mean, does it have to be an undercrossing? I mean, are they cheaper than a bridge?
Yeah, well, the real reason why a bridge is a problem is because you have to have an elevator, and so, yeah. Oh, well, you don't have to have one if the grades work, but along Berthoud Parkway, it wouldn't be really a practical way to build a bridge without an elevator. Or without building a massive bridge. So, Berthoud Parkway and undercrossing, I think, is much simpler. Same's probably actually true with 287. Anyway.
Don't forget, there's a CU team competing for the Elon Musk tunnel, so I still think that's a good combination.
Why don't we reach out?
Actually, so one of the case studies that the students did for their research for 287 was a tunneled undercrossing in Fort Collins. So the road didn't have to be closed down. It was kind of
CU-CSU partnership going might really work.
Are they partners though? Are they rivals?
We make it a mile high challenge there.
So with the CSU students helping with, you know, that 10% design, I'm assuming that they have to have it done by the end of the semester.
You will see a presentation from them. Well, depending on timing, some of you may not, but they will make a presentation to the board prior to the end of this semester.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
Was and this might be talking, I guess, bigger fish to fry, the Spartan crossing, the railroad tracks, I'm sure the trail, whenever that happens, a trail will be put there with it, like a pedestrian crossing. I mean, in the talks of underpass, it just kind of sparked like, well,
yeah,
we could go under it, but is it possible, or is that, I'm dragging in a whole different problem, but I mean.
I'll be honest, I don't have any desire to try and get an undercrossing from the railroad. It's hard enough to get the at-grade crossing. We did look at an overcrossing. Could we create a grade separated crossing, go over Spartan with both the road and sidewalks? It's both physically infeasible and it's prohibitively expensive, I think. So we will do an at-grade crossing of Spartan at the railroad tracks, and it will include pedestrian crossings as well.
Okay. Makes sense.
What's the time frame on that? I know we've talked about that before.
Somewhere between now and the end of
forever.
time. It'll happen in between those
Maybe
two.
in your lifetime, Lonnie.
I actually, so Mike is Trustee Grace is close, but I do think we've come to a tentative agreement with the railroad about how that's going to occur, including not having to give up 2 crossings to get 1. That would include us installing fencing along the entire stretch of Heritage Ridge to keep people out of the railroad right of way, which the railroad would like and might accept as a trade-off. So I have a meeting scheduled actually with HDR Engineering, who's doing that work for us later this week. So I'll get a better update about what that process looks like. But part of the challenge with the railroad one of the additional challenges I've learned about the railroad in the last 6 months is that they regularly change staff assigned to your project, and when they have a new staff person, you have to almost start over, and so that's happened twice in the last year. So every time you think you have an agreement, you don't. So until it's signed, until the ink is dry, you don't have an agreement with the railroad.
They probably just relocate them on purpose, so.
I think it's probably a smart strategy from their standpoint.
Because the MPO has a long-range plan too of a trail following the BNSF track. So it would be, neat for those guys to consider that, or let the MPO know that they're not going to do it. But that would solve going underneath 287 by Prairie Star and some other things. Okay. Any other questions? Do we have anyone online that would like to speak to this?
No.
Okay. Anyone like to move?
Well, just a quick comment.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Right.
It's so great that it just worked out. The extra budget facilitated or whatever prompted us to move into updating this, since we've updated all the other plans. You know, just like one of the biggest complaints that we've heard in the past is just the map. You couldn't distinguish between what existed and what was future. So people are like, oh, Berthoud has all these trails. And it's like, where are they? So just the fact that we now have 2 maps is a huge step forward. You know, for some reason, we had the crusher fine shoulder in the trail standard 10 years ago, and then somehow that got dropped, and now it's back in. So anyway, this is just really, really awesome. And having this type of plan will mean the developers do know and have to build their share, their section. But it also should really facilitate getting grants and accelerating. And it's great to see that the Loveland connection is actually really starting to move forward, because that will, like you said, open up, you know, ride to LaPorte, Greeley, just incredible. So our next goal will be to make the southern connection. So, which you'd think Boulder County would want to help with, but for some reason Boulder County doesn't really seem to think north. So anyway, that'll be for somebody else to work on. But anyway, awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who is moving? Is someone moving?
I'll move.
Okay, go ahead. Trustee
I
Stevens.
move to approve the 2022 Trails Master Plan.
Second.
All right, Trustee Stevens had moved. Trustee Grace has seconded. Any final discussion on that? Clerk, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Hyman,
Yes.
Trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Trustee Hardy,
Yes.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Mayor Karsbeck.
Yes. Okay, we have an executive session scheduled, but we're going to do reports first, since we won't take any action after executive session. So we'll just move right on to reports, and we'll start off with staff.
I don't have a lot specific to discuss other than I'm happy to answer any questions you do have. One thing I did want to bring up, two kind of save the date items. March 25th, which is a Friday, we're hoping to host a summit on entrepreneurship Mayor Summit on Entrepreneurship, we actually had one planned for back in 2020 and had to cancel because of COVID. Maybe that turned out to be a good thing in that on the 25th, we may have the opportunity to have a very high profile keynote speaker from very high up in the state government. They've basically committed if we can make that date work, which is why we're accelerating. We had actually intended to have it a little bit later this year. But if the governor is available, we will take him. So it's highly likely, and I don't wanna, they're gonna quote in the newspaper probably, maybe I shouldn't have said it, but they've basically said if we can do it on the 25th, he will be in the area and may be able to come be our keynote speaker. So I want you to save that date. If you're interested in attending, we'd love to have all of you join us at the Mayor's Summit on Entrepreneurship. We'll also have, Walt's already talked to a number of local businesses who represent a variety of industries, from aerospace to hospitality to light manufacturing, and to some really neat progressive stuff with natural heats and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, we'll have some cool speakers and a cool panel discussion and hopefully a really awesome keynote speaker.
Whereabouts is it gonna be?
It'll be held at the TPC Clubhouse.
Not down here.
Not in Michigan. So that leads me to my second item, which is after the election, on the night that the new board will be sat, which we think will take place on April 26th. I'd like you to hold the date if you could.
What was that again?
Suggest the 26th, that'd be our second meeting in April. But based on the time of the election, when that election is likely to be certified, that's probably the night we'll be seating the new trustees. We thought it'd be nice to have a dinner with the current trustees, the new trustees, and all of our department heads as kind of a welcome, and do that prior to the board meeting. So it would be earlier than normal, but I think we may do it down here. Maybe we'll do it up in the atrium.
Taco John's?
Your space. We'll bring in some potato olays from Taco John's. Some nacho cheese sauce. I think the trustee Grace wanted a nacho bar. No. But anyway, I just think it'd be a nice opportunity to get together with the current board, the new board, department heads, Attorney Smith certainly, and
Well, that'll certainly be a better welcome and opening than 2 years ago.
yeah, the 2 years ago
With the solo mask swearing in.
Can I bring my family? No.
It was only a little sad.
Doing the dinner upstairs would obviously be.
it would be a lot better than doing
nicer
it down
than
here.
being in the dungeon.
But just wanted to put that on in your minds now, knowing that it'll be earlier than our normal board meeting, and we'd love to have you all be available for that.
That's a great idea.
After that board meeting, I think Jeff said he was gonna throw a kegger at his house.
And the whole town's
That's
invited.
before the meeting.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
And that's it for me.
All right, thank you. Attorney Smith? Any questions for
Well,
Chris?
just can you comment on the drinking water notice, because I have had some concerns from
Yeah,
a couple people that just said, what is up with your drinking water?
nothing is wrong with our drinking water. Our drinking water still meets all state standards. It's still perfectly healthy and safe to drink, and of good quality. The notice that went out is a required notice because during our there's a handful of items, but most of it relates to our backflow prevention program. Backflow prevention devices go in commercial properties, commercial and industrial properties. They also go, the small ones go in your irrigation systems. The idea is to keep water from getting back into the drinking water system from areas where there might be contaminants. Because of, frankly, I think in large part because of our change in leadership in our utilities departments, we had a period of time where we couldn't produce backflow prevention documentation. And so there's a required notice when you can't meet the standards for even documentation, even if it has nothing to do with actual water quality. So it is not a water quality issue. Our water is just as good as it's always been. But it's a record-keeping issue that has been largely solved. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's the gist of it.
Other questions for staff? All right, Attorney Smith?
I have nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Hyman?
No report.
Okay, Trustee Hardy?
Don't have anything to report other than Main Street did send a letter of support for the downtown upgrades, which look like have been moving forward because I've been seeing a lot of underground paint striping going on down there, so.
Thank you for bringing that up, Trustee Hardy, and thank you for the letter of support from Main Street. We submitted a grant through the Revitalizing Main Streets program through CDOT to start work and construct the improvements that were in the Mountain Avenue overlay plan on 3rd Street and Massachusetts. So we submitted a $2 million grant request, which will allow us to really accelerate that project and do something really awesome downtown if we're able to get it. I think we put together a competitive application. Ryan, the assistant to the town administrator, who I don't know if many of you have met, but he's submitted a lot of grant applications. I think he's batting 750 or so far, so his average is pretty good. So
we should be seeing some asphalt breaking down there pretty soon?
No, we are working on the design regardless of whether or not we get the grant. For a handful of reasons, Old Town Hall, we want to know what those improvements are going to look like when Old Town Hall gets redeveloped. There's actually a new owner of the grain elevator who wants to do some really awesome redevelopment work there, keeping it completely historic, but just sprucing it up and creating a really cool shopping destination. So anyway, we think that there's good sense to doing that design work now, whether or not we get the grant, so that we can kind of outline where all that goes. And so the markings you're seeing is probably related to survey that we've surveyed
For design.
starting. So we have to do some subsurface utility investigation engineering as well as part of that. So.
Okay. And then historic preservation met. We approved a sign program to designate historic buildings in town, whether they be homes or commercial. So you'll be seeing those little things pop up here and there. I think we'll have our first one up in May is what we're shooting for. We still have 2 available seats on the Historic Planning Committee. So if there's anyone in the community that likes to do well with old houses, get contact with Christian or get on the website and fill out the application.
All right, thank you. Trustee Stevens?
I have several. I'll try to abbreviate them, but just a lot of this is more out of curiosity and my own knowledge. The first one is the cable, or fiber optics. When we opted out, or when we had a vote to opt out of SB 152, I know we had talked about possibly what the possibilities were of starting our own or fiber optic system or whatever, and then subleasing or leasing to other carriers, that type of thing. Why did we skew away from that rather than go with an outside source completely?
So, we had this conversation a little bit. I think the meeting you weren't here, but in short, we studied both the development of our own broadband network as well as the development of a publicly owned broadband network between the 4 communities that participated in that study, Milliken, Mead, Johnstown, and us. And then what the consulting firms that we hired to help lead us through that process, their take is that the most efficient way to get a broadband network deployed throughout all 4 communities would be to partner with a private entity. So we went out and talked to solicited proposals from private companies that do that work, including talking to Loveland Pulse, that's not a private entity. And Allo Fiber said, we'll build out a network without any of your investment if you just help us with expedited permitting and other things. It's not an exclusive arrangement, so it doesn't prohibit anybody else from doing that. including the town. But they can get that done and they think around 2-year time frame, which is dramatically faster than we can do it ourselves. And so the other 3 communities all felt like the best path forward was working with Allo to put together a franchise agreement, non-exclusive franchise agreement that would allow them to expeditiously build out fiber networks in all 4 communities at roughly the same time.
I think I was part of that. I remember, it sounds all familiar. I was just, I was doing some research, some history on some other municipalities and what they did and why they did it. And several of them did it on their own, and some of them were smaller than us. And that opened up opportunity.
The board could still choose to build out our own fiber network and compete with Allo and Comcast and anybody else. You know, the arrangement that we'll be negotiating with Allo is not exclusive. So Hilltop could also build out and choose to compete with Comcast and Allo or anybody else that's already in the ground.
Would we offer them the same?
Yeah, they would have, and in fact, I think the comment, I wasn't in attendance at the Johnstown meeting, but I think the comment was actually made at that meeting, like, hey, if Hilltop wants to sign basically the same franchise agreement and have access to expedited permitting and access to rights of way and utility easements and all those things, we'd offer them the same deal.
Okay. All right, that was just reassurance. It's, then the reservoir grant of cleaning up, I know that was part of the consent agenda, but part of that grant is on exhibition or exhibit D talks about fiber optics. Could have been part of that grant as well. Did we look at that?
That grant wouldn't have funded anything of any significance. It was a really small pot of money, the Montgomery County funds. Our ARPA funds, of which we received over $2 million, could be spent on broadband. It can be spent on utilities, water and wastewater utilities. It can be spent on broadband infrastructure, and it can also be spent on business support or COVID relief programs. So the federal government has come out with a final rule about how that money can be spent. They had an interim final rule, which I don't even know what that means. It's kind of like a draft. But I think for all intents and purposes, those rules are out now and have been for about a month or so. And so as soon as the new board's sat, one of the things we need to talk about is what we're going to do with that ARPA money. We can choose to invest it in broadband, but
I saw a $10 million limit. I didn't know if that was, you know, how wide that went. Okay. Do we have any, I don't want to say any kind of update on rec center prices and accommodating some seniors? To me personally, one of the main things is if you have a membership, you're local, you have a membership, and you still have to pay an additional fee for some of the classes, where somebody that's not a member pays the same fee, that doesn't seem quite fair to me. I think we need to give the members, regardless of if they're aging or not, a discount.
So the members already have access to half of our classes for free. So we, in the spring registration guide, we offered, I think 41 classes, 21 of those were free. There's 20 that are classes you have to pay for. The courses that we added back in after the discussion from the handful of folks that were upset about us changing the Aquafit program, that was the only program that was at issue. We had an Aquafit class in the morning and the evening. They were both free. We eliminated the morning class. We kept the free evening class. So that class was still available for free. That never changed. It was just available at a different time that didn't work for that group of folks. Or that they said didn't work for them. Doesn't matter. We added back an Aquafit class on Wednesday morning, and we've also added another, I forget the name of the class, it's another fitness class. It's not Aquafit, it's in the fitness room, but it's geared towards seniors, and it's one that's well attended. We added an additional class back in on Saturdays as well.
Okay, and I wasn't aware of that.
We've added a handful of classes back to the schedule that are free and trying to accommodate some of those times. There's, you know, the question about what classes should be free and what shouldn't be, is an interesting debate. We can make everything free, but I think there's a balance, both generating revenue to help support the facility and, you know, like if you take swim lessons, you have to pay to take swim lessons. You know, there's a whole lot of things that you have to pay for to do at the rec center. We are considering and will, I think, suggest to you that we do a discount for members for all paid classes, but that we would still have some paid classes.
Okay, well, it sounds like things have I don't want to say improved, but have geared towards, you know, helping out some of the people that had those issues and that type of thing. So I appreciate that. And I'm just following up on what some of the citizens have talked to me about, so.
And we still have close to 2,000 members at the facility, so not everybody's upset about the idea, and we still have really well-attended paid classes, so.
So is Jeff gonna get another rec center going?
I will say, we laugh a little bit, but on Saturday, we reached capacity in the pool.
Really?
Okay. Thank you. Just real quick, I got an article from Tim about Main Street, and I think it kind of plays into what we've already talked about, but I know our Main Street overlay plan, is it kind of geared towards the pedestrian-friendly atmosphere, and is that the direction we're going? And how much of that grant, is that the grant you were talking about?
100%.
Okay, then that's.
Well, except for
perfect.
bikes, right? Because someone made the comment at the last meeting about bikes, but we pushed bikes off of Main Street.
In the Mountain Avenue overlay plan, we suggested that we would create parallel bike routes on Welch and Massachusetts, because that stretch of downtown, Highway 56 through downtown Mountain Avenue is both narrow, and so it's tough to include bike lanes on the street, and it has a ton of traffic. And so the idea was that it's not that you can't ride on Mountain Avenue, you can. You just
have to ride 25 down the center of the lane.
Pretty much. And so we
Who
would.
can't do that?
In the plan, the suggestion or the idea was that Massachusetts and Welch would be created as parallel bikeways to Mountain Avenue.
Okay. And lastly, and I hope I'm not stepping on Mayor Pro Tem Dower's, one of her things, she was nodding her head, I think I've hit a couple of them. This is in regards to the Terrion service, well, actually, the service plan. It was apparent to me that during the last meeting that a modeled service plan might be what is needed because there's enough issues or concerns with leaving it open and based on a state level guideline. And after talking with Mayor Pro Tem Dower, I mean, there's several things that she pointed out to me that I have a hard time reading and comprehending, but she helped me, you know, with some of the things. And, you know, I'm not going to go through it. I was going to, but just to save a little bit of time. But I really would encourage that we have a study session and really look at the possibility of having a model service plan for several reasons. I mean, just an empty check for a developer, they're always gonna look, it was apparent they're always gonna go for the max. And a lot of times, is that at the expense of future homeowners and business owners? They might know up front what, you know, what's gonna cost them, but I think it's our job to to look out for our citizens, you know, to some level. So I think I would really encourage that we would have another study session and get at least look at maybe Fort Collins, some other municipalities, what their service plans look like, and maybe adopt something a little closer to those. So we're not just, you know, open to anything.
I think the idea of a study session is a good idea. My only suggestion would be that when we come to that study session, it would be cognizant of what specific things we're trying to address. I think it's helpful for us in trying to present policy to you that might make sense, to know what the problems are that we're trying to solve. You know, cause there, you know, there are several different model service plans, even in northern Colorado. There are other, metro district policies, they all address totally different things. They all center around the same kinds of issues, mill levies, junior bond debt, public disclosure, things like that, right? It's all kind of around the same set of issues. They're all dealt with very differently. And so I think there's commonality, but it would be helpful for us to know what specific issues we're trying to solve, because then I think we can make some good recommendations.
No, I agree, but anyway, that, I just want to say openly, I appreciate the conversation that Mayor Pro Tem Dower and I had, helped me tremendously to kind of understand it a little better. And I would say right now, given everything that's in place and what we have in place, I would still probably vote the same, but that doesn't mean that I don't think there could be a lot of improvement and going forward. And I think it's relatively urgent. So if Terrion does come back to us, they have something that this is what we're looking for, rather than voting it down and not knowing what we are really looking for. So anyway, that's all I got to say about that. Thank you.
Signing off like Forrest Gump.
The weather report.
Yeah. I'll leave the Youth Advisory Commission for Mayor Pro Tem, because she's the liaison. Didn't want to step on your toes there, but I was there. It was cool. It was great. The kids are great. I'll just leave that. To also steal some other thunder from Trustee Stevens and also Pro Tem, the rec center. I think any kind of subsidies that we can do, it's still within the first year. I think as time goes by and we get more data and we can see better trends, we can make much better judgment calls. But I mean, trying to call it hasn't even been around for a year yet. We're way past expectations of what we were hoping for in terms of use. I'm more than okay subsidizing this just to see what works and what doesn't. Making a discounted point for members, like, okay, here's your class, but because you're a member, it's this much, or, members get this free. If you're not a member, it costs this. I think that would be a good idea to at least explore a little bit more. Again, just one of those, like, there's a lot of different classes that have to get paid for. I'm not sure if they have to be fully paid for by the individuals, or if we can kind of absorb that just to see what it all looks like and what works. Again, kind of the point you already brought up, so I'll just move on unless you had anything else you wanted to add to it.
Well, I'd just say I don't intend to be contrary, but the parallel point to that is we're kind of doing that. We're seeing what works and what doesn't by charging too.
Sure.
And my argument for doing that is that it's a lot harder to go back and charge someone for something that's free when you decide you have to do that or you should do that, than it is to say, hey, at the end of the first year, we're killing it and we're going to add a bunch of extra fee classes next year. And so we feel like it's appropriate to have a balance of paid and free classes. Every rec center around us does that, regardless of what people will tell you.
Sure.
All you got to do is go to the registration guide. There's lots of paid fitness. So it's, but if the board wants us to have all free fitness classes, we can do that. That's your call. I would suggest that we don't.
Right. No, it's hard to unpush that button for sure. Just, ways we can play with it, see what works best.
And again, I would point to the fact that we have nearly 2,000 members. The facility is very heavily used. The fitness classes are still well attended. And that doesn't mean that every single person that walks in that door is happy when they leave. That's just the reality of running a business, no matter what you do. And as you all know, on the town board, every decision you make, half the town's going to be mad at you. So, our goal is to try and provide the best experience and the best opportunities for the most people. We feel like that's been really successful so far. That doesn't mean everybody likes what we're doing. But that's my take on it, but I'm totally open to whatever you guys.
I'd like to think that half the town is going to appreciate what we do.
I like your perspective.
It's a sunny side up stuff. And I guess the last bit would be just kind of also echoing the getting a service plan in place. I know 2 years ago, to kind of pull a Jeff, 2 years ago I was also we had just kind of finalized some of the information. I remember there was a study session talking about metro districts, and I remember sitting through that, and everybody behind the dais here was against it initially, against metro districts, because they had so much information in the newspaper saying these are terrible things, they rob people blind, and at the end of the meeting, it turns out that that's not fully the truth, it's just kind of whoever plays with it. And I also remember at the end of that, a lot of people were interested in, let's get our own service plan, let's get it built up and kind of framed such that this is what we want it to look like, and we'll play with the exceptions as they arrive, but the general form is this. So I think, a study session to get that in place, and again,
So I will be, I will disagree with you.
Oh, okay.
That was not the decision of the board at the
That's
time.
not the decision of the board. If you go back and look at that meeting, we considered it, there was a lot of questions and opposition. The majority decision was, we don't need a model service plan, we'll take it case by case.
That didn't mean that we didn't have a handful of things that we were concerned about.
Sure.
The form and the timing of disclosure was a big one, right? Making sure that people knew what they were getting into and how do we do that, and are these disclosures easy to understand, easy to read? And so we changed those, and every metro district since then has adopted basically the same version. And we've had several service plan approvals since that time where we never discussed the model service plan. Where the board approved those service plans, including a major service plan amendment at Heron Lakes, the Trails at Creekview, I think Rose Farm Acres was part of that as well. So from my perspective, that was not the decision of the board. Now, at the same time, I think it's important that there's clarity for the developers. And so if there are limits the board wants to set, if we want to allow metro districts, but under a very specific set of circumstances, then I do agree that we should have a model service plan. But I don't think that was the decision of the board previously, so.
Okay, yeah. Having a study session about it, I'd be okay with that.
I think that's a great place to start.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem?
So, I'll start with the Youth Advisory Commission. The teens are doing a fantastic job of organizing and moving forward with their summer teen event. Personally, I've been pretty darn impressed with their process. They, in the presenting a budget to the town staff, the kids considered and came up with on their own most of the budget items. I'd say they came up with a good 85% of the potential budget items. So they did a fantastic job of coming close to what it really truly would take to put on an event of this magnitude. They also have been communicating directly with the vendor. And I did forward on an email from the president of the Youth Advisory Commission, Grazia Novak. She has been communicating, like I said, with the vendor, and she does need some guidance on who can sign the contract. So
We do need the board to approve a budget first, so
Okay.
I do need that information.
Okay.
Only because the current budget was, the youth advisory budget is only $2,000. So we have other areas of the budget where I think we could do that, but if you'll recall, that was something that came up during the budget discussions, but because we didn't have a plan and we didn't know how much it would cost.
Right.
We didn't increase the budget at the time.
Yeah, we said we would do a supplementary budget item afterwards.
Yeah, so
to
I think
catch it up in
if we're
June.
ready to rock and roll and they've got that item, then we'd like to get that in front of you guys at the next meeting.
Okay, next meeting, we will make sure that the kids have that rolling. And I will just say that Trustee Grace was an excellent help at the meeting with the town staff last Wednesday morning? Yeah, because he has experience with big events and how to set them up. So it was really, really great having you there. So thank you.
Did they officially name it yet, or was that just kind of can we even talk about that yet, or is that still secret?
I think that it sounded like they kind of maybe decided on the name, but not
Really
quite.
convincing with that language.
Yeah.
They might have, could have, possibly.
Could have, so I think when they do present the budget to the board, to staff and to the board, I think they do have to nail down their name on that. So we'll encourage them to do that. The next is on the port committee. There is Zoe Shu is listed as the liaison from BYAC, and actually, she is no longer on the BYAC, and, because she's moving on. However, I believe it's Daniel Hatton has expressed an interest on being the next Youth Advisory Commission liaison on the Port Committee. And I think we need to put it in as an official recommendation and vote on it and adopt him as a member of that commission. So I would like to maybe get that as a brief item on a
Just make that
future
motion.
agenda. Make it right now?
Yeah.
Okay. I move that Daniel Hatton be the BYAC liaison representative to the Port Committee.
Second.
Ooh, I think trustee Hyman just squeezed out a second.
Oh,
on that,
fine.
so. Mayor Pro Tem moved, trustee Hyman second. Any final discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Excellent. Okay. Good deal. All right, next one is on to the rec center pricing. Yes, I agree that there are many classes in other towns, other rec centers that do have additional charges. I feel strongly that we should subsidize this first year, and yes, it is hard to raise prices, but I think it's a sign of goodwill from the town to the citizens to start with a lower price this year, with the caveat somewhere on the pricing to say subject to change in 2023. So a little asterisk by all of those saying, subject to change in 2023. So they know that they've got this opportunity to check out these different classes. And in addition, charge the members a lower price than those who do not have memberships. I think that's really just an appropriate thing to do. So I would be in favor of adopting a budget supplement in June to increase the funding to the rec center so they can actually, Amanda can actually afford to hire or these, have it in her budget to pay for these instructors so that we don't have to charge our members as much. So to subsidize it, as was said before, but to make a clear note of it in our literature that it's subject to change. And I think that might be a good compromise. I don't know if anyone else is with me on that.
I think we go slow but intentional, because on one side, let's open this up, let's get more people involved, but if it changes, we're not also the ones on the horn getting screamed at that, Silver Sneakers isn't there or something, so.
Right, so some sort of middle of the road compromise, but making sure that Amanda has the budget that she needs in order to do that. So, let's see. I did learn that for water exercise classes, the morning classes are by far the most popular. And if we would like to keep those people coming to the Berthoud Rec Center in the future, it would be highly advantageous to offer more morning classes. So that's from water exercise instructors, I know several of them. So that's a big deal. If we want to keep them as customers in the future, we should try to offer it now. I'm glad that you got one more in the morning back. And then regarding the Metro District Model Service Plan, thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for considering supporting it. I do think it's important for the town to set some limits that are possibly, as I call them, backstops. With the state, they all take the full amount every time. I don't think we've had a developer come to us yet that has said, oh, and by the way, I don't want to use the full mill levy that I could possibly use. I only need, 50 mills or 60 mills. I don't need the full 75. We have had 0 developers come and say that to us. So if we set what is reasonable and make and look at, I really do feel that the Fort Collins one is something that we could adopt fairly straightforward with a couple of deletions and possibly 0 to 1 additions so that we can move it through. My concern is this, that the current board has been very well educated, or relatively well educated on metro districts in general. We've all taken Metro Districts 101. We have looked at a couple of metro district plans. So I would suggest that you guys consider either we try to get this moved through as a basic, adopt another plan that's already been proven, again, with maybe a couple of deletions and 0 to 1 additions, and get it done before the end of this term. Or you will definitely have to look at doing another Metro District 101 class for the new trustees that will come in, and review all of that information and then move forward again in the future. And it would be nice for developers that might be considering coming forward with Metro District plans to know what the board feels is reasonable, and have it there so that no one is surprised with the next one that comes in. So that would be my suggestion, that we get it done. What's the last board meeting with
It's,
this group?
it's probably March 26th, unless you want to do that after the election happens, but before the new board gets sat, which I don't know. I think it's up to you, but I don't know if that's a good idea. You do have 5 Tuesdays in March, so we have the ability to have an extra meeting prior to the election date, if you look at it that way. But otherwise, I think I said March 26th, but it's March 22nd. Sorry.
Okay, so, we could make a special meeting because it's
That's
not
what
a
I'm
regular.
suggesting, yeah.
Got it.
So there's 5 Tuesdays in March.
So either the 15th or the 29th.
Okay. Okay, so let's see, I would like input from the rest of the board, how you feel about that. If the board members who are likely to continue on want to put it off until after the election, that's just fine. However, if we do want to get it done beforehand, we'll need to schedule both a study session and potentially, depending on what the agendas are already, we might have to schedule an extra meeting.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine with me.
Yeah. We've all kind of gone through all of the, to put it bluntly, so I think.
So let's try to get that
Yeah.
study session, or even an agenda item, unless you want to do a full study session. What's the first open one?
So, so the Tuesdays in March, it's a little bit short notice to do March 1st, that would be next week. March 8th, we have a meeting. March 15th is open. March 22nd, we have a meeting. And then March 29th is.
So how about the 15th?
Let's do the 15th, because in that way,
So March 15th is spring break, and I have a vacation planned.
Okay, and March 29th, I have a vacation planned.
So we got next week, or
Next week or the 8th,
or we could fit it in, if we have a light meeting, we could make an agenda item that's.
we can make an agenda item that we discuss it.
Yeah.
Okay, instead of a full-on study
That's
session.
just my
Let
thought.
me look at what's on our calendar coming up really quick. And then give-
Remember to add in your eval too, because that was supposed to be tonight.
I assume that will be a long and painful discussion.
No, actually.
No.
I'm kidding. Let's see, we have quite a bit of stuff on the 8th, but none of it is, so here's what we have on the 8th currently. We've got the bike park bid award, which I think would be relatively straightforward, assuming that we receive good bids for that. We have the town park concept plan, which we'd like your approval with before we move into full design. So we're probably at about a 30% design phase before we go spend the money to go all the way forward. We want to get your kind of final sign off on that. We've got the ordinances that you considered tonight, an executive session, and then a couple of other ordinances to introduce, similar to what we've did tonight, but some cleanup stuff. So I don't know that those are super heavy. We could have that discussion on the 8th.
What about a suggestion of this, that are there any agenda items that are scheduled for the 8th that are potentially kind of ready to go? Or do they all need more work by staff?
On the 8th, everything on the 8th is prepared and ready to go, or should be prepared and ready to go, assuming again that we get good bids, which we haven't received yet on the bike park. The other things are all kind of done and ready, but if you guys would rather prioritize metro districts, that's no issue. I don't know that we need to do the town park concept plan. I mean, that's a totally discretionary item, that's up to you.
Yes.
You know, one thought that occurs to me is that it might be possible, it's fairly technical information in the proposed policies that Fort Collins has. Maybe on the model of the sign committee, maybe it'd be possible to have a couple of board members, too, so that you wouldn't be, you know, in violation of open meetings. Sit down with the key staff folks and come to some consensus on how to bring a recommendation forward.
Did you say the sign committee?
Well,
Yeah.
on the model of the sign committee, which you just did
Oh,
a
I
couple
gotcha,
of,
yeah. okay.
I mean, that's just a suggestion. Then you aren't taking a bunch of fairly, well, some very technical stuff, trying to digest it as a group at a study session. But I'm only suggesting that because of the nature of the information and the time frame that you've got.
I would say that I wouldn't suggest that we get
Okay.
into a lot of technical details in a study session. From my perspective, if you gave us specific instruction or direction about, like, if you wanna cap mill levies and you say, we don't wanna allow mill levies above 40 for debt and 10 or 15 for operations and maintenance, that's an easy thing to accomplish. If you say, you know, we wanna require a form of disclosure that's part of our model service plan, whether we do it already or not, we wanna formalize that process. If we wanna cap developer debt or not allow developer debt at all, you know, there's those handful of items I think we've talked about several times. If you have specific direction about what you wanna do, we don't need to get into like the ultra technical details about state statute, and all the other stuff I think is pretty complicated. We can work together and draft reasonable language, either via ordinance or whatever other mechanism is appropriate.
I don't think it would be ordinance.
But to implement that policy.
I like
So, but I think that would be my goal in a study session, is to get that kind of direction.
So what about the two-person committee with staff to kind of prep through that and then have that at
And
the
then
study
just
session?
present it at the meeting.
And then see
I
if
have
we
no
can
issue
work
with the committee, I think that's a good suggestion also. So if you'd like to do the committee and then bring that information to the study session, that's fine with me too.
That works. Does that work with everyone? Have-
Trustee Stevens, would you like to be on that committee?
Depends on when it is, but yeah, I wouldn't mind that at all.
Cool. Do you wanna do the other one?
Yeah, so we can do the committee. We just need to find a time that staff is available and that we can be available. And we can go over the key
Yeah, I think
points
so.
that are
Yeah.
not part of the state
As long as
plan.
Administrator Cook, Kirk
Yeah.
is buying coffee, that's all I care about. So.
I might even buy bagels.
What? All right, I'm there.
I'll be there.
Cool.
Okay, so
We'll just-
we'll plan on that.
We'll just decide on a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll shoot out an email to both of you and we'll look for a time to do that.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, well, that eliminates a lot of the issues with taking up valuable time at the meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
okay, that sounds great. And that is it for me, and thank you all for humoring me on this kind of a big deal, but on short notice, and hopefully it'll be pretty straightforward.
I support it. All right, first I just wanted to hit the entrepreneurial summit that Administrator Kirk brought up. Fort Collins started that a couple years ago, and the idea was for it to travel, and it actually stuck at Fort Collins. Walt and I attended one, and we were so impressed that we volunteered the town during the COVID time, like Chris said. And it was really impressive because there is a recognition that we're kind of looking for outside commercial, and there should be some kind of equal effort to promote your existing businesses and help them get to the next step. So that's really cool that we're bringing that in. I attended the transit assessment with Administrator Kirk on an update of where we're at with our consultants. And there was an overview of the assessment and the surveys that were done at the Rec Center grand opening. And there's a significant desire to improve and increase our routes. And we left with kind of the two stronger options of where we want the consultants to go. One is exploring options to increase the routes that we have right now and the time, improve the routes that we have right now. And then the second option was to increase routes and times and then look at possibly merging with Raft, right?
Raft, yep.
So that was the kind of the most aggressive one. And that, let's see. And then there's a handy ditch meeting I just heard this week. Did that already happen?
No, the annual shareholders meeting is on Saturday.
Are we sending someone?
I'll be there.
Okay. MPO meeting last time was evaluating $15 million awarded in a call for projects. So it was pretty neat to see anywhere from smart signals to battery electric vehicles being awarded out to Northern Colorado. I met with Chief Charles yesterday. He wanted to meet and just gave me a bunch of data showing the need for a station at Wilson Ranch, the funding issues there, to keep that level, I think it's a level 2 designation, which really helps out with our fire insurance. And if there's nothing out there, that how much more Turion residents would be paying. Same thing for over by the golf course. So they're having trouble over there finding a suitable, I think they need an acre, and just the funding challenges on finding money to not only buy the land, but to construct the building needed out there to get the same insurance that we have here in town. Then I have a lunch meeting with CDOT director next week, and she just kind of wanted to meet in Northern Colorado. So we're meeting in Loveland, and we'll just go over our North I-25 updates. And I think that is it. Okay, is there anything else as far as reports anyone forgot? If not, let's move into executive session.
I move to enter into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 4EI to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing a strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators. And the following details are provided: potential property acquisition.
Second.
All right, Trustee Stevens has moved. Mayor Pro Tem Dower has seconded. Any final discussion on that? Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Grace?
Yes.
Trustee Hardy?
Yes.
Trustee Hyman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Mayor Carlsbad?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to abstain from the executive
All
session.
right, thank you. Have a good night.